Chapter 4, Seer's X's Summoning. Let's start the show. Speaking. Flashbacks and thoughts. Single quote dot. D-Drake speaking out loud. Single quote ellipsis dot single quote. D-Drake's thoughts and speaking in Issei's heart. Boosted gear action. The sun slowly peeked through the blinds and illuminated the cold room where three heads could be seen peeking out from under the cover. During the night the temperature dropped tremendously and would have woken the occupants in the bed by now if they hadn't grabbed onto one another during the night. As the sun rose higher with time, Asia slowly woke up from her slumber. With the soft blanket still over her small body, she felt comforting arms wrapped tightly around her like every morning. Only this time they were far softer than usual. In her sleepy mind she wasn't able to make the connection that someone else was holding her as she turned around and buried her face in Issei's chest, or so she thought until she felt two soft globes of warm flesh envelop her cheeks and a sweet voice sighing in pleasure, tickling Asia's tender neck. Her drowsiness was slowly replaced by surprise and fear, and as she slowly tried to remove her head from the unknown chest, two small hands pulled her back, whispering in a sweet voice, "Come." Issei-chan, before the unknown female voice returned to her silent snoring. Asia could feel happiness radiating from the voice when she uttered Issei's name, welling up feelings of jealousy in the blonde girl. Though she was always a soft and kind person, the former nun couldn't hide her own feelings for Issei and grabbed the two hands that held her head in its embrace tightly, so tight in fact that you couldn't call it a friendly mistake anymore. A mistake she shouldn't have made. Often when she was in a deep slumber, Seraphal had flashbacks to the past which caused her to sleep with one eye open, remembering her past. But ever since she started sleeping in Issei's embrace her dreams were devoid of anything harmful. Unlike her bubbly mask which would probably fool us, Seraphal's dreams didn't show a pink world where she ruled as a princess guiding happy families with a twinkle of her magic stick. No, her dreams were far simpler as she was sleeping on a white cloud under a blue sky. And like today Seraphal slept nice and warm in a dreamless state like she was on a cloud. Last night, when she teleported to Issei's bedroom she didn't notice the other occupant of the bed and didn't feel threatened by someone else in her vicinity. In her unconsciousness she could actually see a soft and fluffy white cloud resembling Issei behind her, gently holding her in his embrace. Happiness, which had become such a rare emotion for the girl, slowly welled up inside of her as she surrendered herself to the comfortable warmth. But with time the embrace slowly became undone and as she tried to open her eyes, pain enveloped her hands and the cloud disappeared. Her dreamless surroundings became dark and frightening. Unconsciously she began to shake and quiver, trying to pull her hands back to herself, but the unknown wouldn't budge, and as she opened her eyes, she woke up back in the past. Flashback. On a cold, dark night in a small shed not far away from the luxurious mansion where the Seatree branch family lives, an 8-year-old girl slowly woke up with a sore throat. Kuch. Seraphal coughed painfully and as she opened her eyes she felt a sudden cold assault her small body. Like many other days, it was freezing cold outside as she felt the ice-cold wind howling outside and came through the hole in the roof in her room. Coldness became a second home for her since she was forcibly moved to the mountainous area where the branch family lives. Even now as the shed was too cold to actually live there, she made a small igloo around her bed to keep at least a little warmth around her. There wasn't even a small fireplace to warm herself and the only light she had was the moon. Like many other nights, she tiptoed over the cold concrete floor to the cracked window that gave her a magnificent view of the starlit sky and in the distance she could see the lights of the floating city of Grias, and as she watched she couldn't help but curse softly, wondering why the good things in life never happened to her. After spending a good 30 minutes staring at the stars and constellations she wiped away her tear-filled eyes and slowly wandered back to bed, preparing herself for another day filled with training. But as she slowly fell asleep and her breathing evened out, Seraphal had no idea that this night would drastically shape her future. An hour later as fresh snow softly floated down from the sky, several small figures could be seen sneaking towards the shed where Seraphal slept. They walked through the shadows of the trees surrounding the back of the shed, making sure no other noise than their soft breathing was heard. Slowly they surrounded the damaged building and pushed the door, which unfortunately didn't have a lock, open with an eerie push. As they tried to stop their giggling, the small figures walked inside and found the miscreation they had to call cousin sleeping with no visible emotion on her face. "Grab her feet and hands," one of the boys whispered, "I'll take care of the rope," and snapped them in his hands. They quietly grabbed Seraphal's hands and feet and began immobilizing her till it was too late. A few minutes later, Seraphal slowly began to wake up. She felt cold and her bed was much harder than usual, she couldn't even move her arms and legs. Slowly blinking she found herself laying on the grass with 6 smiling faces surrounding her. However, her smile was nowhere to be found when she saw her arms and legs tied up. Seraphal recognized the faces of her cousins when their faces became visible under the moonlight, however, she couldn't hear what they were saying when 2 more cousins joined them. If she could hear them they would have said that the coast was clear to bring her to the deep well. With a rag pressed in her mouth, she wasn't able to scream as they dragged her limp body to the farthest edge of the yard, far out of view from the mansion. Cold sweat flowed down her face and back when she saw where they were taking her. In panic, she began to flail but it was useless as 2 of her cousins began to hold her arms and lifted her up. As they reached the well they dropped her down with a thud and Seraphal was finally able to see them. All her cousins stood there with several emotions from anger to dismissal at her figure, causing her to look down in sadness. The oldest of the group stepped forward before kicking her in the side to get her attention. "You're finally going to get it now," he mercilessly whispered. "Grab her, she's going for a swim." When she heard the last 2 words, Seraphal tried to move away from them, but they were too fast. Even her pleading magenta eyes weren't enough to stop her cousins, her own family, from trying to drown her. Getting closer and closer to the deep, dark well where the bottom wasn't visible, Seraphal began to shake more and more as she gained a terrified look on her face. With one last dark smile, the oldest cousin grabbed the bucket that was used to get the water and hang it on the rope tied to her legs before filling it with a large rock, too big to keep an 8-year-old body floating. As her cousins kept cheering the oldest boy on, Seraphal kept shivering and hoping that it wasn't more than a nightmare, but it wasn't as her cousins closed in on her. Sending their last glare and a, "Freeze yourself out of this, freak," they dropped her terrified form in the ice-cold well. Yes, how they loved to call her freak. They noticed how their parents didn't particularly like her, but they didn't do anything out of fear of her growing powers, and as they stared at the magenta-colored eyes slowly disappearing in the water, they felt a satisfied feeling of accomplishment as they sent each other smiles when the ripples in the water ceased to be. In the deep well, where Seraphal slowly submerged to the bottom and the feeling of true loneliness washed over her, she couldn't do anything else but cry, as she could do nothing else but recall the satisfied glint in the eyes of her cousins as she sang. The light of the stars no longer lit the place where she was destined to die in the penetrating cold of the deep water. Her tears mixed with the water as if she could still feel everyone's sneers on her back, watching in glee as she drowned. A powerful feeling of pain took root in her heart and back as she felt sadness wash all over her. Sadness for her life before screaming even more in the rag that was still wrapped around her. Screaming as the pressure of the water began hurting her, and the ice-cold water trying to take her conscience away. Black spots narrowed her eyesight as it frightened her to the core. She would die here and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Flailing her arms wouldn't help as the rope was still tight around her arms and legs, freezing the water wouldn't help either as she would still be stuck in the well. Her heart screamed in despair and anguish, and as she closed her eyes she began to wait for the end. But the thing was, she knew how to escape. She has known it the entire time. Seraphal could have stopped her mistreatment anytime she wanted to. If she could just accept herself, accept the demonic power she was blessed and cursed with, she could save her life. Seraphal wouldn't find out till she was enthroned as Malleviathan, but when she was born she was very sick and frail. Too sick to survive. Her parents at the time pleaded with the doctor to save Seraphal's life, but he had only one solution. Forcefully open her magic reserves, but her daughter wouldn't be able to control the power as the small body wasn't strong enough to use it in a refined way. Opening the power that early would make it grow and she would literally become one of the strongest devils, but she'd never be able to become the heir of the Sea Tree clan. Her parents had never told her this, they only told her how she was sick when she was young. So in the end, ever since she was born she was lied to. Seraphal never accepted the power as she always tried to refine it into water magic and never in ice. Her parents knew why though. If she would accept the power, its demonic edge would corrupt her mind and send her into a frenzy. They warned her that she would receive a harsh punishment if they'd catch her using ice magic. Deep inside of her mind, where she locked herself, she saw two small flames in front of her. A black one, choosing it would mean her end and she would remain where she was, waiting to be grabbed by the hand of death. The second flame, a deep glowing blue one, was the power she was born with, but taking it was just as hard. Seraphal would have to accept that she would never gain the love or approval of her family, but she would live. More than once she was tempted to grab the black flame, extinguish it and end the nightmare called her life, but the stars and light that gave her hope at night whispered kindly to her. Find friends and loved ones. Make your own family, they quietly seemed to whisper in her mind. But Seraphal was afraid. The power came at a cost. It would overwhelm and corrupt her senses. Friend or foe, it didn't matter. You can do it, softly resounded through her mind again. You are the light in any darkness. So she took it. She stretched out her small hand and as she touched the blue flame, her conscience disappeared in a flash. The small, still sinking, body suddenly froze as an ocean worth of deep cold power coiled through her veins, overloading her small body with power. Her tired vocal cords suddenly stretched as she began yelling in the water out of pain when she felt her back began to rip open. What she couldn't see was the fact that her usually kind magenta eyes began to glow maliciously. For a few seconds, everything seemed to stop before several shocks rocked her body like something tried to escape her back. From the outside, the shocks from the depth made ripples appear in the water. As more and more ripples surfaced and the cousins that were still hanging around were alarmed that something was happening, beneath the water Seraphal's shocks managed to free one of her legs from the rope. Slowly but surely the shock receded back inside of her body until Seraphal felt her back break several times and 6 pairs of wings suddenly protruded from her back. The sudden pain was enough for Seraphal to black out and her unconsciousness to take over. She had finally established her power. The demonic energy she normally released in small bursts in her aura had grown severalfold. Seraphal's unconscious body was now eerily floating in the water, her 6 wings lifelessly stretched out behind her until she touched the bottom of the well and the world trembled. From the well, visible emotions of betrayal, survival, fear, and hate washed over the sea tree grounds in an attempt to show them what they made. For the first time her eyes glowed in blue, not the blue of inviting water, but the unforgiving color of all-devouring ice. Suddenly the body began to jump from the bottom, and with every step she took, the water beneath her feet would freeze, turning it into stairs. She would come for them all. The cousins that first celebrated their accomplishment were rocketed to the ground when they felt deep emotions surrounding them like a curse. First, they thought it was a fluke, having scared themselves with wild stories, but nothing was less true when the sky darkened, blocking even the comforting lights from the stars. Soon after, a blanket of power washed over them. A power far greater than they thought someone could possess, especially since it felt so familiar. By the second ripple of emotions, they felt the power coming closer, skyrocketing their heartbeat. Even more so when the soft grass beneath their feet began to harden and die out before cracks appeared on the dirt, like it was frozen. And as they were frightened to the core, she appeared from the water and they all turned towards her as one. Emotionless she ascended from the water as her wet hair and pajamas clung to her body. But what feared them the most were the 12 bat-like wings with frozen tips behind her back sticking through her shirt. Slowly she lifted her head and her gaze froze them on the spot. Her lonely but kind magenta eyes were no longer there. Glowing sapphires of ice replaced them. Eyes that could penetrate their souls and freeze them on the spot. They were unable to scream or shout, just like she couldn't. As they felt Seraphall's characteristic aura, it felt like a physical weight was pushing on their trembling forms. Lights turned on in the mansion when several men and women from the Branch family ran outside, only to stop when they saw Seraphall. The infamous 12 wings brought forth enough respect not to be trifled with, so no one dared to approach Seraphall or her frightened cousins. Silently she ascended into the sky, hovering above the heads of her cousins, who were wondering whether they should run or beg by now. Soft whispers were suddenly uttered by a deep guttural voice from Seraphall, but they couldn't understand her. Seraphall opened her eyes once more and scared the bystanders before she slowly raised her right hand and several spikes of ice protruded from the ground, getting closer and closer to her family. The unconscious body wanted to end their lives but Seraphall woke up. Instead of being spiked, the cousins looked up to see small frozen pearls falling from Seraphall's face, and as they looked closer they saw that the magenta had returned to her eyes. Seraphall regained consciousness and saw the scared and frightened looks from her family. It was the first time that she could see what she had become. A demonic ice devil, and as she turned her face back towards her cousins they all recoiled in fear. Fear of her. The feeling was strong enough to grip her on both sides. Anger for what they did to her and this was what they deserved, and deep sadness for frightening them. Her core, her light, one as sudden teardrops were coming down her cheeks. There was nothing more to see than devil wings on the figure of a lonely angel. When her hatred tried to take over again, she flew up in the sky, away from her family, away from everything, and she wouldn't be seen until the start of the war. As the light Seraphall was, the war was a blessing in disguise. After leaving the family, she couldn't control herself anymore and she went on several killing sprees, killing everything in her path. During the war, as she had quickly risen through the ranks, she lost almost all of her hate and anger. But to lose it, she killed fallen and angels by the thousands a day. She made by far the most kills of all devils. She had grown accustomed to the vast power she possessed, and as she had grown older during the war she was now able to freely control it. Even water by now was easy for her. But now the recollection of the war assaulted Seraphall when she was the most vulnerable, in her sleep. Night after night she would wake up from terrible nightmares where she would uncontrollably kill any and all in her sight. Their last looks more often than not showed nothing but fear before they would perish. Now her normal attitude had returned. She wanted to redeem herself by protecting the underworld. Seraphall wanted to repay those that lost their lives unnecessarily during the war, and to not show the horrors of war on her face, she made a mask for herself. The mask she used to cope with what happened during the war, the innocence of Mahushuju. The magic girl that protected her sister and the citizens' innocence from war, a Mao with a mask. However, a mask doesn't hide one's true nature. A mask doesn't stop the nightmares. So sometimes, just sometimes when this once little girl is hurt or scared, the Leviathan awakens. Asia, who still had her hands wrapped around Seraphall, quickly removed them when she saw small streams of tears gently rolling down her cheeks. She began to tremble softly as she cursed herself for hurting someone and looked at the girl. However, Asia was terrified when two glowing ice blue eyes suddenly looked back at her. Out of fear and pain, Seraphall unconsciously began to release a portion of her vast power as her hands being tightened reminded her of the night where she almost drowned. The archaic power halted Asia from doing anything but fear for her life and squeaked when she was slowly freezing to the bed. Slowly the warmth was sucked out of the room, causing Asia to shake in fear. A small sheen of ice and frost covered the bed by now. Her quivering, emerald eyes were locked with flashing blue-purple eyes that were still releasing their tears. The combination of the small squeak and the sudden decrease of heat slowly rose Issei from his slumber, and as he woke up he didn't expect to find Seraphall in his arms nor Asia being frozen alive. With Seraphall already crying and Asia began to flail and squeak when her breath was being taken away, Issei decided it was time to act. Just before Seraphall was about to attack, Issei slowly covered her quivering and cold body in his arms before he pulled her away from Asia's grasp. Carefully Issei summoned his boosted gear and warmed Asia up and managed to loose her trembling form from the frozen bed. With two girls that were both very scared of what just happened, Issei made his request. "Asia, can you start preparations for breakfast?" Issei softly asked with closed eyes as he pulled Seraphall closer. A small uneasy glance was etched in Asia's eyes when she looked at Issei before she puffed her cheeks lightly in jealousy of Seraphall's position but quickly left the bedroom. When the door closed with a quiet click, the tension in the room dropped tremendously as Seraphall's eyes lost the blue glow and returned to their magenta color, though the tears were still rolling down. The room was completely quiet now. The lamp above the bed swung a little under the amount of ice that was on it, and everywhere Issei looked, everything was covered in a small layer of ice. "What a surprise to see you here, Seraphall," Issei said in a soft voice. "I'm pretty sure you weren't here last night." However, Seraphall didn't answer him but he knew she heard him when he felt her shake a bit more in his arms. "Is there a reason you are here?" Issei asked again. The girl in his arms felt like she would be punished like she used to receive. They'd dunk her head in the water when she would disobey them, so she couldn't do anything else but hiccup and close her eyes tightly. Issei felt like he underestimated her past a lot. He decided to talk to her about it when they were closer to one another, but for now, he would let her know that he wasn't mad at her. So for the coming 20 minutes he would have to help her through what just happened. Serafal, who expected Issei to harshly reprimand her and tell her to stay away from him, was surprised when he moved closer to her and laid his chin on top of her head and pulled her closer. His arms closely and protectively wrapped around her small body. "Don't worry, Sarah, I'm not mad at you," Issei softly whispered in her hair. "I'm sure something had happened before I woke up." Out of relief, Serafal cried and smiled at the same time and wrapped Issei's arms even more around her. Issei sighed softly, happy that the girl he came to befriend was smiling again. "Can you tell me what happened?" Issei asked as he wiped her last tears away with his sleeve. With a forlorn look in her eyes, Serafal explained what had happened in the past. Issei was shocked that even Serafal's own family tried to kill her. "I'm happy you came last night," he softly said. "I'm sure we can be your family." Instead of responding, Serafal held his hand a bit tighter and held it to her cheeks. With only a few minutes left before having to go to school, Issei reluctantly took his hands back and gave her one final advice. "No one here will try to hurt you, so please don't do it again," he said as he chastised her softly. "So come," Issei said as he rubbed his face through her long, black hair. "Let's get some breakfast. Hurry up, Issei. Don't be late now, Mrs. Hyodo said when Issei entered the room, but recoiled a little when she saw someone else following him, even Mr. Hyodo had to look up from his newspaper twice when he saw the twin-tailed girl enter the room. However, this time, she wore clothes more suitable for a girl the age she tried to be. Serafal wore a pair of blue jeans and a purple top. "Son, who did you bring home last night?" Mr. Hyodo asked baffled. Never had he seen his son bring a girl home. Asia was brought by Rias after all. Mom already met her yesterday. The self-proclaimed magic girl. Issei answered his father as he took a seat next to Asia, who was still looking at Serafal with a little fear. Serafal had to pout at Issei's answer about being a self-proclaimed girl but answered Issei's father anyways. "My name is Sarah Citri. Issei said I could come over anytime so I joined him this morning." "Ooh, I remember now," Mrs. Hyodo elatedly said. "This is a much better impression though," she quietly muttered in one breath. "So Issei," Mr. Hyodo began as he folded his newspaper and took a mouthful of his coffee. "Is she the first member of your harem?" he asked. Issei snorted out his tea and coughed out loud whilst Asia looked uneasy between Issei and Serafal, who was enjoying the situation between the Hyodo family. "Dear Mrs. Hyodo yelled before smacking her husband on the head. The poor girl probably doesn't even know what a harem is. And at that moment, the former incarnation of lust said something that shocked his parents to the core. "It's not like that anymore, Dad. I don't want a harem anymore," he said with a smile before he was run over by his mother and to his surprise Asia as well. "Issei-san, are you alright?" Asia asked with a trembling voice as she clamped onto him. His mother has already grabbed the phone to call an ambulance as she was certain her son had a terrible disease. Hello 119. She yelled with a cracking voice. It's my son, something is terribly wrong with him." Mr. Hyodo took the phone away from his wife and excused himself before ending the conversation. As Mr. and Mrs. Hyodo kept quarreling with one another about Issei, the three others quietly made their way out of the dining room. "Can you wait outside for a minute, Asia? There's something I need to tell Serafal," Issei said as he stopped Serafal from moving. "Not too long, okay Issei-san," Asia said and wordlessly moved outside. When Asia was out of sight, Issei turned towards Serafal, who looked at him with a questioning look. "What is it, she asked before she was swooped up in a sudden hug. Just like this morning, Issei's taller body was wrapped around her in a comforting manner. What are you doing, Issei-chan?" Serafal murmured with a small blush, though she enjoyed the sudden contact. "I'm seeing you off," Issei said as he let go. "Have a good day at work." Serafal looked dumbfounded before she interpreted his words and gave Issei a beaming smile. "Thank you, Issei-chan," she replied with a twirl on the ball of her feet before a small blue magic circle appeared beneath her feet. As the magic circle lit up and Issei waved her goodbye, she suddenly stopped to relay Issei a message. "After classes, go to the Orc clubroom, someone will be there to pick you up," she said seriously this time. "You've been summoned by Mal Lucifer." "Why?" Issei replied, wondering what his least favorite Mal wanted. "It's a secret," Serafal replied with a mischievous smile before giving him a last wink and disappeared in a swirl of ice. Issei sighed out loud before a small smile lightened up his face. There's never a dull moment with Serafal around, he thought fondly before making his way outside. The duo of Asia and Issei were quickly walking towards Kuo Academy, like any other morning, only this time Asia was persistent in holding Issei's hand. "Asia, we're going to be late like this," Issei said with a small sweat drop when Asia kept walking slower and slower but kept hugging him closer to her. "Good morning, Issei and Asia." Stopping in their tracks for a moment, they turned around to see Katase and Murayama walk behind them. Since Issei's change in mentality, they haven't spotted him peeking on them in the dressing room of the Kendo dojo, which made him a lot more likable. "Ohio," he replied with a small wave whilst Asia smiled at the two girls. As a group of four now they walked towards school. While Issei was thinking about what he could expect later today, the two girls kept a close eye on him as they saw how unnaturally close Asia was to the former pervert. Nearing the school, the bell suddenly rang and the group quickly ran towards their class. Inside of the classroom, it was pretty busy when the four of them entered. Kiba sent Asia and Issei a quick smile that showed he was relieved that they were on time. As Issei took his seat in the back, he heard his former pervert friends talk about a new transfer student. They heard them starting to saliva as they talked about a hot girl, whilst behind them, a group of girls was talking about a new prince. The whole class was now gossiping about the prospective new student when the door opened and the teacher walked inside. Everyone calmed down and stood up from their seats until the teacher was seated, and he spoke. Today we will get a new student from overseas. I expect everyone to treat her well. The teacher said as the boys were silently cheering that a girl would join them. Please come in, the man said, and the door opened to reveal a familiar figure to some of them. She silently walked inside towards the chalkboard and wrote her name in Italian and Japanese before she turned around, facing the class. Issei, who was excited about the new student, felt his heart drop when he spotted the familiar blue hair and the silent dismissal of everyone in her view until she locked eyes with him. My name is Xenovia Quarta. She introduced herself as she kept staring at Issei. I will attend this school for the foreseeable future, and bowed gracelessly. Her clumsy bow and tough exterior made her an instant hit with the class. Xenovia wasn't moved by the declarations from the students to turn her into a princess or make her their class president, as her eyes would remain solely focused on Issei, who by now was positively mortified by the durandal bearer. Does anyone have a question for Miss Xenovia? The teacher asked as he managed to calm down the class a little. Several hands went up in the air, and the teacher chose first. Alright, Motohama, you first, but no perverted questions or I'll give you a month's worth of detention. The teacher said with a serious look, causing Motohama to swallow his saliva. Motohama coughed in his fist as he wanted to know her bra size, but he didn't want to lose his precious eroge time, so he asked a normal question. Xenovia-san, why did you come to Japan? He asked. Without caring for any consequences, she pointed at Issei and said, I want to be close to the security. The class looked at Issei with different expressions on their faces. The majority wondered what she meant whilst some of the guys looked at him in anger or jealousy. Security? The teacher asked questioningly before Issei slammed his face on his desk. With a red forehead, Issei stood up and held his desk before laughing uncomfortably and said, please dismiss what she just said. It's my gamer tag on a game we play. Some of the students were satisfied with his explanation, as was the teacher, whilst some were still looking at him suspiciously but didn't express their doubts. After answering a few more questions regarding Italy, the teacher clapped his hands to quiet everyone down. Alright Xenovia-san, please take a seat next to Kate-san in the center. The teacher said and pointed at the girl who lifted her hand. No, Xenovia said as she walked towards Issei. I will sit next to the security. Slightly baffled by her dismissal, the teacher wanted to reprimand the new transfer student, but Issei was a bit quicker than him. Shut up, Xenovia. Come here, he impatiently said before returning to his seat with an expression. Many in the class were surprised to hear Issei like this. Even as a pervert he would never raise his voice. The teacher coughed slightly embarrassed before he started his lessons. An hour and a half later, the teacher gave his home assignments to the class and left in a hurry. As everyone began to pack their bags, the orc members joined Issei at his table, ready to question the warrior of the church. They left the classroom and walked towards the clubroom when Issei asked his first question. Xenovia, why are you here? This is still devil territory, you know, he said as he looked at the girl, who was staring at him with a curious look. She stopped in her steps before saying, I'm not here as Xenovia the holy sword wielder but as Xenovia the human. Issei didn't really understand what she meant, and looking at his confused gaze, Xenovia continued. After you saved me from Kokobile, I did a lot of thinking. Why was I saved by a devil when I prayed to God? She said as she looked deep into Issei's eyes. I've decided to stick around and find out more about you. What about the church? They wouldn't let their warriors just walk around. Issei asked with a small frown. He didn't like the girl very much but he didn't wish her any problems. No, you're right, so I gave the cores and my sword to Irina. Xenovia replied casually. I didn't give her a choice. Flashback. A blue-haired girl wearing a cloak and a brunette twin-tailed girl wearing a gray suit were walking inside the airport. The cloaked girl was walking with heavy steps as the twin-tailed girl was smiling brightly, happy to go back home and happy with a successful mission. Suddenly the blue-haired girl stopped. Irina, she said, I can't come with you. Irina pouted her lips cutely and replied, Moo. You can't stay here like last time in Ireland. Remembering what happened, Xenovia managed to suppress her blush and said something unsettling to her partner. I can't stop thinking about the security, Xenovia suddenly exclaimed as she held her hand on her heart. I was saved by a devil who I threatened, whilst God didn't answer my prayer, she said, causing Irina to look up in shock. I'm not as faithful to God as you are. I wasn't prepared to die out there. Why was I saved by a devil? I need to find out more about him before I can return back to Rome. Anno Xenovia. Michael Sama won't be happy if we don't bring him the Excalibur cores. Irina replied as she mentioned the reason for coming to Japan in the first place. Ooh, that's okay. Xenovia blankly smiled and handed her the large suitcase that Irina wasn't able to hold without complaining. Goodbye for now, Irina. As Irina saw Xenovia walk away, everything suddenly came clear. The twin-tailed girl suddenly fell on her knees before yelling, E. The group of devils was stuck between laughing and feeling sorry for Irina, so they decided to say nothing at all. The quirkiness of Xenovia was completely new to them. So here I am, security, Xenovia said coolly. As Xenovia kept staring at Issei, a small drop of sweat rolled down his temple before giving her an uneasy smile. It's good to have you here. Issei replied unsurely before resuming his way towards the orc clubroom followed by the others. Inside of the clubroom, the other members had already gathered. Like many times, Kaneko was quietly eating some of her candy whilst looking at nothing in particular whilst Akeno was preparing the tea, having sensed the other members closing in with one extra. In her seat, Rias was twirling a small chess piece between her fingers. The night she felt she needed a suitable candidate for. Softly she sighed before placing it down. I can't think of anyone, she thought. Closing her eyes as she laid her chin on her hands, the door opened to show Issei and his group. Rias opened one of her eyes to see who was there and was surprised and elated to see the holy sword wielder. Confidence filled her heart when she thought about winning the girl over as she straightened herself with a smile and welcomed her. Slowly she stood up before sensually walking to the front of her desk and leaned on it, before crossing her thick thighs on top of each other. Welcome to the Occult Research Club, Xenovia-san. What can we do for you? As Rias was buttering Xenovia up, Issei took his seat between Akeno and Kaneko, and when he looked at them they were both quite unhappy. Kaneko looked like someone had taken her candy, which happened because she felt like she couldn't help Rias during the fight with Kokobile. For Akeno it was quite different. Ever since Rias was reluctant to get help from her brother to save Issei, she felt quite down. Akeno though the safety of her peerage was the most important to Rias, but this time it wasn't. She began to question how important she was to Rias as well. With the girls feeling down and Issei feeling slightly guilty, he began to pay attention to the conversation between Xenovia and Rias that wasn't going the direction the devil wanted to. What do you mean? Rias asked with a shock on her face. Why wouldn't you want to join my peerage? I am only here for the security, Xenovia answered uninterestedly. I still hate your kind though. Rias felt like she was smacked in the face at her refusal, and decided to try a more devil-like approach. If you want to be close to my pawn you have to join my peerage. She rebuked with a dark glint. Saying no to Rias Grimori was a capital mistake for some. Instead of falling for the plan of the devil princess, Xenovia walked uncomfortably close to the devil, who was surprised by the sudden development, and pinned Rias between her and the desk. The others in the room were too surprised to act and could only watch at what would happen now. With a dark sneer written on her face, Xenovia exactly told Rias what she thought of her idea. I who have followed the word of God all my life, following a devil, the bane of all evil. I would never follow one such as yourself, rotten to the core. I could feel your vile intentions the second you laid your eyes on me. Your crimson hair also rubs me the wrong way. Crimson hair of death. At first, no one knew how to reply to her words and left the room in an awkward silence. Xenovia, who didn't really care, kept staring at the crimson-haired devil in disgust as she sunk even lower on the desk. Outside a crow was cawing, virtually laughing at her. Xenovia stood up, not interested in the words of the devil, and said in the door opening, if I can't stay here then that's fine. I can always visit him during school hours, and left. If you like you can visit my home after school as well. Issei shouted and saw her nod before closing the door. During Xenovia's monologue, the others in the room paid attention as well. Kiba, though relieved at finding closure, didn't agree with Xenovia and stood up to support Rias. Akeno and Kaneko, though they didn't express it, couldn't help but wonder what they would have thought of devils if their past didn't bring them into contact with Rias. Asia only went up to Issei to give him a sad smile. She didn't forget what Rias brought him, and as she was raised in church she was also told of devils, but she didn't consider Rias as a bad one. Please do not worry, Bushu. My sword will only serve you, Kiba said as he summoned several black and white swords from the repaired floorboard. Rias gave him a small smile out of happiness before looking around to see the looks of the other members of her peerage. Some showed small amounts of conflict, but generally they agreed with Kiba. Kiba, what are these? They feel kind of dangerous, Issei asked as he hasn't seen the holy demonic swords yet. Issei-kun, he said as he summoned a single sword in his hand. These are my resolve. Partner, Didrag interrupted in Issei's heart. This is his balance breaker. A much-saying smile graced Issei to Kiba's confusion. I'm really happy for you, Casanova, Issei said. But before Kiba could ask Issei why, a sudden magic circle appeared in the room, causing everyone to tense. At that moment, Issei realized he hadn't said anything about getting picked up today. Sparkles of silver mixed with a crimson red before it illuminated the figure that suddenly appeared. No one was as surprised as Issei when Grayfia suddenly appeared. Still, the beautiful maid was an unexpected visitor, causing the others to wonder why she was there. Carefully the strong silver eyes scanned the room before finding Issei's, softening her look when she spotted him. Without any other expression, she gracefully walked up to him under the judging eyes of Rias and stopped in front of him. Hyodo Issei-sama, she gently began, you've been requested to appear before the mouse. Soft gasps were filling the room, but none came from Issei, making Grayfia confused at his response. Eyes. Rias began at the lack of his enthusiasm. It's a great honor to be summoned by Oni-sama. However, Issei never broke eye contact with Grayfia as he answered his king. Bushu, Sarah had already told me that someone would pick me up today. Sarah, Rias asked. Do you mean Sarah Fall-sama? Issei answered quietly. She's a new friend of mine. But still Issei-kun. Akeno interrupted. Talking about Leviathan-sama like that, she said with an uncomfortable expression. Issei-san, Asia suddenly slowly whispered. Was Leviathan-sama who we slept with last night. Though she said it so quietly, the clubroom fell silent and everyone forced their eyes on Issei when they heard what Asia said. Chuckling uncomfortably, Issei looked at Grayfia with a pleading look that said he'd explained it to her at a later moment before he turned towards his friends. I did, Issei replied. Twice already. Before smiling frighteningly at the looks he received from the girls. Pervert, Kaneko harshly said before continuing with devouring her candy. Era Yufufu. Looks like this Oni-sama has to step up her game. Akeno said as sensuously licked her index finger, causing Issei to look away with a small blush, whilst at the same time, Rias was locked in an internal battle. Eyes. Rias thought as she felt a slight tinge of envy in her heart. Why couldn't you pick me? Asia, who had already come to terms with Seraphal's visit, nothing had happened after all, saw how her master was a bit downtrodden and came over to help her. With everyone busying themselves, Grayfia saw it was an opportune moment to take Issei away. Silently she sneaked behind Issei and teleported them both away in a small magic circle. A few minutes later, when Rias had shared some tears out of happiness when Asia revealed that nothing happened between her pawn and Seraphal, they noticed that Issei had disappeared. Nothing to do about it. Rias spoke out loud before she stood up. I've received a message for Onisama. Asia, I want you to meet my other bishop. She revealed and walked out of the clubroom, followed by her peerage. With a small light show, the duo of Issei and Grayfia appeared in front of a large palace, but instead of gawking at the grandeur of the palace, Issei was intrigued with the purple sky. It's amazing, Issei suddenly said as he looked to the sky and buzzing city. The current capital of the underworld Lilith. But where are we now? He continued as he looked at the patient queen. This is the Mao's residency, Issei-sama. Grayfia coldly replied, much to the unhappiness of Issei. Please follow me. She curtly continued and began walking away without waiting for Issei. Inside of the lavishly decorated palace, a large dome had hallways stretching in every direction. Countless weapons adorned the walls and a large fresco was painted onto the dome, depicting the victory of the anti-Satan faction during the Old War. As they kept walking, and Issei admired the artwork, he was also surprised that a lot of people bowed to Grayfia, whilst some gave her hateful looks. Suddenly, Grayfia was approached by a brown-haired man who was followed by a gigantic figure, causing Issei to look up in surprise. Grayfia-san, it is I, Beowulf. The man said as he identified himself as Searsex's pawn and gave her an inappropriate grin. It was destiny to meet here today. Beowulf-san. Grayfia replied uninterested. Please step aside, the Maos are waiting for us. Us. Beowulf replied, before looking at Issei. You and the punk. However, Grayfia didn't reply as she looked at Issei and Sorich's Rook Surtur II staring at each other. Are you looking for a fight, huh? The tall Rook suddenly asked and raised his large fists when Issei kept staring at him. Issei, though surprised by the sudden shout, pointed at the Rook's hands. Your hands are like massive. Big enough to hold my head. Issei replied without shame. Surtur opened his hands and stuffed one of them in his coat, causing the other three to prepare for a fight. However, Surtur grabbed a large bottle of sake, which he carried with him at all times, and raised it to his lips before gulping half of it down in one go. Tilda ah, that hit the spot. He said before offering Issei some. You're pretty ballsy kid, I like that. To not insult the tall orange-haired man, Issei reluctantly took a small sip before handing the bottle back and he downed the rest in one go. Beowulf and Grayfia were both watching intriguingly at the scene. Before Surtur was taken in by Searsex he was abandoned as he tried to fight all the time, making him impossible to control. Liking someone was something he didn't often do. Oi tall and ugly. Beowulf yelled. You've begun taking a like to boys now. Surtur, who was infamous for getting angry when being embarrassed, shouted back. At least people notice me when I talk, shorty. Surtur was right, Grayfia had taken zero interest in Beowulf ever since he tried to take her out 80 years ago. Small teardrops rained down on the ground as he landed on his knees and slammed the ground with his fists. Why do people never take me seriously? Boo-hoo. He sniffed as his snot leaked from his nose. With a deep guttural laugh, Surtur focused his attention back on Issei who kept looking between him and a crying Beowulf. What's your name, kid? He asked. Hyodo Issei. Issei replied unsure of the situation around him. I will remember that name. Now you should better go, Grayfia-san doesn't look like she will wait any longer, and he was right. Looking at her, a small amount of ice covered the wall behind her, but her face was just as unemotional as it ever was. Well, I'll be on my way then, goodbye. Issei said and gave a small bow before following Grayfia again. Having left Surtur and Beowulf behind, the duo continued their way through long marble hallways. These walls portrayed heroic stories of the armies during the war, capturing or slaying those loyal to the old Mao faction. There were also several priceless paintings of the current Maos during battle. But none of them interested Issei at this moment. He tried to walk next to Grayfia but she would quicken her pace every time he reached her. I guess it's better to tell her now. Issei thought and in a flash of surprise he grabbed her upper arm. Though he couldn't see her face, Issei could feel how angry Grayfia was at this moment through the decreasing temperature in the air. Seraphal is like us, Issei blurted out, causing Grayfia to turn around. Under the pressure of her gaze, Issei tried to explain why he slept with her. Seraphal was betrayed by her loved ones as well, and Grayfia knew that he wasn't lying. Calmly she removed Issei's hand from her upper arm but the angry feeling Issei first felt was reclining. I wanted to help her too. He softly whispered as he bowed forward a little. However, Grayfia didn't reply and calmly kept walking on. Issei felt that it wasn't enough to convince her, so with a small voice, he opened his heart to Grayfia. You're still the one I want to reach. Grayfia didn't reply, but the one small misstep during her walk was enough for Issei to notice that she heard him. Suddenly she stopped in her step, causing Issei to stop as well before she slowly turned her head at him and whispered, please walk next to me, Issei-san, and continued her walk. Issei smiled softly at her trying to rectify her mistake and quickly hurried after her. Feeling much better. Moo, where are they? Issei heard when he stood outside of a large golden door. He was pretty sure he knew who it was. The Maos receive their guests here, Issei-san. I would like to remind you that these are the four most influential people in the underworld. Their impression of you will path your future. Grayfia said before she opened the door for Issei. He entered a large room which was decorated even more grandiose than the other places he had already seen. Inside of the room was a half-round table with 7 seats, but only 4 of them were occupied. Issei was certain that each of the seats was as old as the first devils, and he saw that all of them had different carvings. At first, he noticed Seraphal beaming in her seat and waving happily at him with her magic stick. Her seat was covered in carvings of several scenes where envy was explained. In the second seat was a man he did not yet know. With long, wavy green hair he watched Issei enter the room with Grayfia. However, Issei noticed how he was holding his fists under the table and grabbed it tightly every time he looked at him. His seat depicted scenes of gluttony. The third seat was a man seated that he did not want to see again. Seer's ex Lucifer. He was wearing a large flame-like armor and had a self-satisfied smile on his face, though his eyes darkened a little when they met with Issei's. His seat had carvings of all that was known as pride. At the last seat, Issei had to chuckle a little. A tall man of at least 7 feet was seated with a bald head and a long goatee. Issei was sure he'd make an impressive figure, at least if the man was awake. All over his seat were scenes depicting lust, causing Issei's eyes to linger slightly longer on them, getting knowing smiles from the other mouths watching from their seat. The other 3 seats were still open. Their seats depicted scenes of wrath, greed, and sloth. The 4 of them are all pretty eccentric, Issei thought and heard a snort of Didrake in confirmation. Grayfia had gotten Issei's attention again, and formally the both bowed on one knee. Satisfied with Issei's respectful behavior, Seer's ex stood up and welcomed him. "Welcome Hyodo Issei, please rise," he said to the young man in front of him. "Allow me to introduce you to the other mouses. You already know Seraphal," Seer's ex said as he pointed at her, causing her to pout and glare at Seer's ex, before smiling brightly at Issei, yelling, "Issei-chan." Smiling back for a moment, he looked at the second Mao, who had an obsessive glint in his eyes which felt to Issei like he wanted to dissect him. "This is Ajuka Beelzebub." Issei gave him a smile as well and a short respectful bow, before he looked at the last person he didn't yet know. "The last Mao is Falbium Asmodeus, and as you can see he is asleep," Seer's ex said with a sweat drop. "His motto is working means losing, so that's basically him," and laughed awkwardly. "Falby," Seraphal suddenly yelled. "Wake up, Issei-chan is here." "I'm already awake, Seraphal," Falbium suddenly said. No one had heard him waking up. "Now that we are all awake, Issei-kun, do you know why you've been summoned?" Seer's ex asked, and everything shifted to Issei. He felt like 4 devils with unending power were watching him closely, like a wave of their hands would be enough to wipe him out and everything 100 miles behind him as well. Issei bowed slightly forward to stop shivering from their looks and answered respectfully, "I do not, Mao-samas." The Maos kept looking strictly at Issei, before grins and smiles formed on their faces. "Issei-chan," Seraphal began kindly, "please raise your head." When Issei looked up, he saw nothing but approval on their faces. "You've saved my sister from an unhappy marriage. I am very thankful to you," Seer's ex said. "Thanks to your quick thinking and wit during battle, we've bettered our reputation with the fallen angels." Seraphal continued. "Sai, you knew your skills well during your battle with Kokobile and saved the lives of not just your king and peerage but also members of the church, the signs of a good leader." Falbium added shortly before closing his eyes. "My approval comes of something unrelated. The power you used during the fight with Riser Finex." Ajuka slowly began before he started to breathe erratically. "... It's unique. It's unprecedented. Calm down Ajuka, there's no need to scare Issei-kun away now," Seer's ex said to his best friend. "Issei-kun, as you can see, Ajuka is quite passionate of everything that's new and unexplored." "I understand," Issei replied and smiled. "With the exception of Seraphal, they are all nuts." Blushing slightly as he coughed in his fist, Seer's ex continued. "Because of your accomplishments, we've decided to give you 4 favors." "Favors?" Issei questioned. "I didn't do anything that deserves a favor. Everything I did was because of Leviathan-sama." Seraphal sent Issei a thankful look before she blushed slightly and looked away. Even her fellow Maos took her accomplishments for granted, so a little appreciation from her newest friend brought her happiness to new heights. It's Leviathan," she softly mumbled in response but couldn't look back at him, afraid that she would show too many emotions. Emotions she wasn't ready to show anyone else yet. "Issei-san," Grayfia interrupted suddenly. "What Mao-sama is trying to say is that you've received 4 wishes." "Indeed you have," Ajuka said. 4 wishes with unlimited possibilities." Seer's ex quickly interrupted. "You may wish for anything with the exception of our positions. You may wish for a harem, for wealth, you could receive blood from a died-out pillar and we'll have it modified for you so you can restart them as a pure-blood devil." Seer's ex continued with a crazed look in his eyes. Issei was slightly frightened by the greedy look in his eyes, like he was about to receive the wishes, and whispered, "He's a true devil." "Didrake, are you there?" Issei whispered in his heart. "What should I wish for?" A deep, rumbling voice from deep within his consciousness had already followed the conversations with the Maos and was thinking for a second. "I have one idea to help you in the future. Ask permission to take the mid-class devil exams." Didrake answered his partner. "It will be a good starting point, now get back. Those devils are looking at you strangely." The others were staring at him, wondering what he was doing, till he noticed them again. "Sorry about that," Issei said. "I've decided on my choices." "Very well then, let us hear them." Seer's ex answered and straightened himself in his seat, like the other Maos. "It is possible for me to immediately become a high-class devil?" Issei asked as he looked at Grayfia with a barely hidden smile. Grayfia was slightly surprised and also let down. Not many people would do the harsh journey of working through the ranks when it can be given to you. Fu, it can be given to you, Issei-chan." Seraphal answered with a cute pout. "But you don't want it, do you?" Instead of an answer, he grinned at Grayfia as her eyes now showed relief and all signs of disappointment disappeared from her body language. You're right, Sarafal-sama. Issei replied to the female Mao. My first request would be the following. I would like permission to take the middle-class devil exams at the first opportunity. Issei said, and saw several expressions of surprise. Searsx softly mumbled under his breath, whilst Sarafal had a proud expression on her face. Ijuka was intrigued at his wish, whilst Falbium was still sleeping. Grayfia, Searsx suddenly said, add Issei-kun to the next exams. If I'm not mistaken they will be held in the Phoenix territory. Very well, Mao-sama. Grayfia instantly replied and took a small note from her sleeve and wrote something on it before sending it away with a small magic circle. Carry on, Issei-chan. Sarafal said with a smile. She was glad her friend wasn't a fake like so many before him. I'm sure Rias-chan and So-tan will help you. Before Issei made his second wish, he bowed down very deeply, much to the confusion of the other Maos and Grayfia. Is it true that devils grow very old, Searsx-sama? Issei asked. Not expecting such a question, Searsx answered unsurely. Yes, we as Mao, because of our extensive powers we will likely live for millions of years. Even ordinary devils will likely live for many hundreds of thousands of years. I was afraid of that. Issei replied. Then my second wish is the following. As you've said, I will be very, very old before I die. I want my parents to be reincarnated as well when they reach the end of their human lives. Issei. Sarafal thought. I will reincarnate them when it's their time. I will have to speak with Michael-chan about it, but I'm sure we can work it out. Sarafal replied emotionally. I'm glad to see you value your parents this much. A slight twitch of pain went through Issei and surprisingly Grayfia as well at her reply. Thank you, Sarafal-sama. Issei replied before he stood back up and sent her a grateful look. Searsx and Ijuka were both silently surprised and proud of the low-class devil as he didn't try to get himself a lavish lifestyle. My third wish is something completely different. I was told that Bushu would return home during the summer vacation. Issei said, I'd wish to visit the library in Lucifod when we arrive in the underworld. Searsx replied with a thoughtful but suspicious look at Issei. What do you intend to search for? Issei sent a quick look at Grayfia that he wasn't exactly sure what to answer, but replied, information about the old families and Maos. I can't really say that I'm completely satisfied with your answer. Searsx began as he closed his eyes to remain calm. But a wish is a wish, before opening them again. From a drawer in the table, he took an old pen and paper before he started to write. When he was finished he pressed his thumb on the end of the paper before it glowed once and rolled itself up. Show this to the librarian and he will give you everything you need, and threw it to Issei who caught it deftly. Don't forget it, or you'll be sent back by the guards. Guards? Issei questioned. Why would a library need guards? Searsx's eyes slowly began to glow an angry red as he materialized his power of destruction and angrily said. Because of those filths living there. Calm down, Searsx-chan. Issei didn't know. Sarafal said as she powered up as well, her glowing blue eyes firmly locked on Searsx. Issei-chan. Sarafal began. I need a little time to explain why Searsx-chan reacted like this. Okay, if it's important then please tell. Issei replied to his favorite Mao. After the Great War, we tried to change many things. Sarafal began. With the deaths of the old Maos there were many of our territories in the underworld undefended, such as Lucifod. It is now roamed by several groups of lesser demons, such as succubi, familiars, druids, and cambions. The old Satan faction loyalists also live there. What are druids and cambions? Issei asked interested. I thought the underworld belonged only to the devils and fallen angels. Sarafal had to giggle softly at Issei's lack of knowledge before answering. There are many more creatures in the underworld, only the large factions govern them. Druids are low-level spirits that cause nightmares to weak animals and young devils, whilst cambions are low demons that are born between humans and devils. Don't forget, those devils, Sarafal, Searsx angrily interrupted. Those not conforming to our ways. Looking at Issei, Sarafal explained it. What those devils are the pure-blooded devils that didn't adopt our current look, the look of humans. They still wanted to keep their more demonic looks. Think about tails, longer ears and horns on their heads. So they look like devils. Issei asked with a chuckle. Well, yes, Sarafal replied, but to stop any chance on civil unrest, they are not allowed to leave their current territories, nor is anyone allowed to go there, with the exception of us and the head families of the remaining 72 pillars. We've made an exception for you. But if they just look like devils, what would make it such a problem if they'd just explain? Issei asked. He didn't understand what the big deal was. Well, for such a delicate subject we need a unanimous agreement, but Ijuka and Searsx are both against the mingling of all devils. Sarafal replied again, I personally don't mind, but because they are both devil kings. They don't answer to anyone about the question why. So when you go to Lucifod, expect a lot of security and be always prepared to fight. Ijuka interjected. The devils living there remind me too much of the war, that's why I don't want to see them here. I can understand it, though I don't think it's completely fair to the younger generation. Issei replied with a shrug. Though there was an appraising look in Ijuka's eyes at Issei mentioning the new generation, he wouldn't comment on it right now. You have one more wish left, Issei-chan. Sarafal happily replied. She hoped that she could have some time alone with Issei before he would have to leave again. I've kept the most important wish for last, Issei said with a smile before his expression turned serious and he summoned his boosted gear. Do it, D-Drake, he shouted. Welsh Dragon Balance Breaker. Covered by the red dragon's armor and malicious green emeralds penetrating Searsx's surprised look, Issei pointed at him and made his final wish. I wish to fight you one day, and when I win I will take one of your pieces. Issei said before deactivating his armor and gave Grayfia a cheesy smile. Grayfia, though looking stoically like always, saw the surprise in her eyes. Sears saw the silent conversation between his queen and Issei and was in fact happy for Issei. He had no hard feelings for him because he already settled down a long time ago. Sears had a son of his own. Like Grayfia explained before, he too was like other high-class devils. When she was too difficult and had to work for it, he stopped. But he also felt tremendous guilt that reminded him every day. "You want my queen, Issei-kun?" Sears asked, causing a certain heart to throb uncomfortably with the thoughts of a negative reply. "Yes," Issei instantly replied. "I want Grayfia-san. Do you want her for your peerage when you have one of your own?" Ijuka asked intrigued. Fighting a Mao for a peerage member was unprecedented after all. However, Issei shook his head negatively. But Ijuka had a knowing smile. He was a married man after all. "I see, Issei-kun. I am surprised at your wishes, but they will all be fulfilled. Just let me know when." Sears replied before focusing his attention on the other Maos. "Sarafal, Ijuka, Falbium. Please leave us for a moment. Grayfia, you as well," he said. "Sears, you've said I could take him with me for research, no you liar." Ijuka shouted when Sarafal pulled him with her. Sears Chan, Falby fell asleep again. Sears smiled at Sarafal and said that it was alright before he closed the door with a swing of his hand. The room was quiet for a second, with the exception of Falbium's soft snores. With the door locked, the mask of the good-natured Sears Lucifer shattered and the real Sears Grimory appeared. "Now, Hyodo Issei," he calmly began, "do you know why you are here alone with me?" Sears slowly began to glow in power out of his rising anger, which was being absorbed by several glowing seals on the table, seat, and even ceiling. Issei, who no longer had to pretend he liked Sears gave a sneer of his own. "I guess it's about your little sister," he replied tensely. "That's right," he replied as he folded his hands under his chin and his eyes ablazing red. "I won't accept you threatening Ria-tan. Rias again," he continued with a slight blush when he mentioned his favorite pet name. "There's nothing more important to me than Rias. What about all the devils?" Issei replied to the crazed-looking Mao. "Everything I've ever done was for the betterment of my family." Sears said as dark flashes of terror he committed could be seen in his eyes. "My sister. Always wanted to have one of your kind, so I will keep you alive as the only one," Sears said to the small white-haired Nekosho. "I can't let you leave here, exorcist," Sears whispered in a blue-haired exorcist's ear after he pushed his hand through her back. "The Grimory grounds are off limit to your likes, dragon." A howling ball of black and red was shot at a family of three, flinging the three out of the window. Looking at a job well done, Sears walked away whilst whispering, "Goodbye Lucifuge family." Sears slowly powered down after reliving some of the things he'd done in the past and warned Issei one last time. "One more things, Issei-kun," Sears said. "Stay as much away from the power you've managed to acquire during your fight with Riser Finex." "Power?" Issei asked with a frown until he was reminded of the fight, the flashes of red and black. A sudden sad pout appeared on Issei's face when he remembered Drake informing him of it. "Don't tell anyone." Mao's order. Sears said with a serious look. "Sigh, it's not like I wanted to have it, you know." Issei answered downtrodden. "Very well then." Sears nodded in satisfaction at his answer. "When your demonic power grows you will be able to use it on command. So prepare for a shitstorm when it happens." Sears continued. "I guess so," Issei said uncomfortably, not knowing what else to say to the Mao. Sears quickly reverted back to his usual mask and called for Grayfia. "You may leave now, Issei-kun," Sears said as his queen entered. With one last mandatory bow, Issei left for the door. "Issei-kun, one more thing," Sears hastily said. "Yes," he replied questioningly as he stood in the door opening waiting. "You've intrigued my curiosity, perhaps a small insight why you wanted these 4 favors when you could wish for a harem and a high-class devilship." Issei turned around and looked him right in the eyes before he said in a voice filled with passion, "I cannot be worthy of my dream if I do it the easy way," and softly smiled whilst looking at Grayfia. "Every good thing in life takes hard work." Seeing the signs of love on Issei's face, Sears replied, "There is no greater purpose in life for men than conquering a woman's heart." Issei blushed a little before he bowed once more and left the room. "A fine young man, don't you think, Grayfia?" Sears nonchalantly said as he began working on his papers. "Hi, Mao-sama," she replied stoically. But deep inside of her chest, her heart encased in ice, was a long-forgotten emotion felt once more. Outside, a magic girl was patiently waiting when she felt a familiar dragon signature coming closer. She quickly kicked her feet up and saw her latest interest walking out of the room. That idiot. Trying to compensate for something with his large armor, Issei thought as he closed the golden door. "I hope you're done soon, Grayfia-san," Issei softly said before he heard steps rapidly closing in on him. Issei-chan, was the only thing he heard before a small but very feminine figure jumped on him. After a quick, but intense, hug, the small arms around his waist released to show Sarafal with a happy smile beaming at Issei. "It's good to see you again, Leviathan-sama," Issei replied very formally, much to Sarafal's irritation, which she let him know with a knock from her magic stick. "Pam, Leviathan," Issei softly chuckled at their performance before softly rubbing the twin-tailed girl on her head. "Sarah, no Sarah-tan or Leviathan from me. Moo." Sarafal pouted, though she was glad at his resolve. Getting a no from someone was still a refreshment for the strongest woman in hell. "It's only been a few days, Sarah. But, you've been looking better since meeting you," Issei innocently said with a smile. Letting the real Sarafal show through for a second, she replied. I've been feeling better these days, and I'm sure it's because of you. Even little Asia this morning helped me through. You helped me as well, you know. Issei said gratefully. You gave them my report. Sarafal just shook her head negatively with a short smile, before she did a quick spin with a wink as some members of the staff passed before she asked, what did Sears-X-chan want with you? Ah, that, Issei said. The same reason why you came to me. Sarafal could see why he wanted some alone time with Issei. She would definitely want some as well if it was about Sona. By the way, Issei. I can't visit you tonight, but I will make an exception for you and help with the middle-class devil exams when you need me. Sarafal suddenly said before she was grabbed in a quick hug by Issei. Thank you, Sarafal, Issei said. Now I'll definitely make it through. Sarafal could only giggle at his enthusiasm and joined him in it. Straight to the top. With their bodies untangled again, the golden door opened and Grayfia gracefully entered the hall again. Issei-san, are you ready to go? She asked as she looked at him. I'm ready, he replied with a happy thumbs up before turning back to Sarafal. Sarafal was pouting as she was wondering what the relationship was between her fellow Mouse Queen and Issei. For a quick moment, out of Issei's view, ice-cold blue met ice-cold silver for a swift second. They both recognized the coldness that came from pain. Sarah, Issei suddenly whispered from up close. You can come anytime you want. She replied with a swift hug, before turning around and returned to her duties. There was a soft red flash in the hallway before it returned to its former quietness. It was night already in Kuo when there was a small flash of red in Issei's bedroom. Issei couldn't see what time it was, but there was already a figure in his bed, slowly breathing in and out. Thank you for bringing me, Grayfia-san, he softly said to the quiet woman. She gave him a small nod in confirmation, before asking him a question she deemed important. Issei-san, are you happy with your chosen wishes? As Issei looked at Grayfia, his only answer was, if these wishes lead me to you, then I am happy. Issei-san, thank you, she softly whispered. You remind me so much of someone that used to care about my happiness. Even their smiles overlapped, Grayfia thought. I wish you could see him. I'm sure you'd approve of him. A small burst of heat went over her cold visage as she thought about the way she'd get approval. Grayfia-san, she suddenly heard as Issei looked at her confused. Grayfia quickly turned around and activated a colorless magic circle, to not wake the sleeping girl. I wish you luck with the exams. Ria-sama will receive word when you're up. I will pick you up that day. As she attempted to teleport to her home, she was suddenly stopped by Issei's voice. Grayfia, he said, this time without her usual suffix. The magic circle kept flaring, but she didn't leave. If I do my exams well, will you let me take you out? He hopefully asked. She turned around in the flaring magic circle and laid her eyes on him. When she looked in his eyes she saw a real struggle, how far he had to reach to find the courage to ask her. Synapses in her brain fired signals to search for anything that looked like a life from his side but could find none. Her ruby-red lips unconsciously opened and spoke her thoughts. Yes. Issei, who was praying, heard her soft voice agreeing. His heart began to beat very loudly, though this time not out of fear of rejection, but out of happiness. I will work hard, he happily said and grabbed an envelope from his desk which he handed to her. With a confused look, she accepted the envelope, before giving him her goodbyes and flashed away. As Grayfia disappeared and all the magic residue left, Issei sighed softly from all the exhaustion and exhilaration from the day. Silently he undressed and dressed his pajamas and slid in behind Asia, who unconsciously turned around and hugged him close. Issei softly petted the girl he came to love as a little sister and closed his eyes with one last thought, the coming times will be interesting. In the underworld, after having spoken to her master, Grayfia appeared in her home. The only place where she could be herself, and her icy visage crumbled to make place for a soft smile when she looked at the envelope. Like almost every night, she took a bath to relax away the stress of the day. I can't even remember the last time someone asked me to dinner. Grayfia thought as she enjoyed herself with the thought of someone actually caring for her. Agreed, no one has held on this long in trying to gain her affection, but she wouldn't show it for a while at least. Good luck, Issei-san, she thought. Good luck with your exams, good luck with your journey. Ah, Grayfia suddenly mumbled. She hadn't opened the envelope yet. Standing up in the bathtub, she carefully washed off the bubbles that were clinging to her generous proportions. Her near-glowing, ivory skin illuminated the room as her voluptuous body jiggled in the right places towards her bed. Grayfia's bare form came to a halt in front of her desk, gently opening the envelope to read its content. With a soft gasp, she read the outside of the card. There is a gentle thought that often springs to life in me, because it speaks of you, Dante Alighieri, Grayfia mouthed. However, when she opened the card it said when and where Issei had reserved a table. Grayfia fondly smiled at this and thought, it looks like Issei-san can read me better than expected. Putting the card on her desk where she can see it from the bed, her nude form slipped beneath the blankets. Dreaming of a time where she has found happiness again. Inside of the residence of Malleviathan, there's still a small light burning in her room. Sarafal was thinking about the day, but mainly about what happened in the morning and looking at Grayfia. Thinking about Grayfia caused her heart to ache, aching as she went through something similar as herself. Grayfia's silver eyes said everything she needed to know. However, when she thought about Grayfia and Issei, she was hurt as well. What is this feeling? Sarafal whispered. Why do I feel so alone again? I hope Issei knows what to do, were Sarafal's last thoughts before falling asleep. Promising herself to visit Issei again. There we have it, a lot of info and storyline information. Coming chapter will have a lot of info as well, might not be the most interesting but when the story is completed, you'd be happy to know the information. See you next time. Next chapter, Chapter 5, Learning for the Mid-Class Devil Exams and True Forms. First previous ch4 of 6 next. Chapter 5, Learning for the Middle-Class Devil Exam. Chapter 5 Learning for the Middle-Class Devil Exams and True Forms. Yo yo yo, what's up everyone? It's time for a new chapter of Silver Queen. Again, it has taken me some time to write, my keyboard has taken a dislike to me, so sometimes it just doesn't work with me. Since last chapter I've reached well over 500 favorites and followers. I am very happy with that and I hope for your continuous support. This chapter will basically be a filler for the next one where we'll have some new people to introduce. I've made some small alterations to the chapter which I'm pretty happy with and I hope you guys as well. Let's see, what else? As I said, it's mainly a filler but it will have some concealed information for future chapters. Still, I believe it's a nice chapter and I'll show you guys some insight in the next chapter. I hope you'll enjoy the chapter as much as I enjoyed writing it. I've not yet included a Christmas omake, which will be added later. Didn't have enough time left because I have rewritten the entire thing 3 times. I will add it probably tomorrow. With that said, have fun reading and happy Christmas and already a happy 2017. Speaking, flashbacks and thoughts, single quote dot. Drake speaking out loud, single quote ellipsis dot single quote. Drake's thoughts and speaking in Issei's heart. Boosted gear action, stillness and darkness, the only words that could be used to describe this early morning. No one was yet in the streets, no one would even remotely want to be awake at this time of day. Cold air viciously swept over people's homes though it was crispy and fresh, the wind howled louder than rabid wolves devouring their prey. It was just a part of the what had yet to come today, perhaps an omen of sorts. Accompanied by the cold air were murky, looming clouds that were covering the night sky above Kuo, causing nearly all natural light to fade from view. With the exception of the occasional flaps of flying night predators, only eerie cawing of crows and hoots of owls were voiced in the stillness of the dark sky. Something was going on. It didn't take long for those sounds to cease, only to make place for the first drops of liquid directly coming down from those same murky clouds darkening the sky, causing a never-ending water show to fill the view of Kuo. These same drops of water not only pelted down on windows and roof tiles, it also caused the dark clouds to lose some of its density, becoming slightly clearer. Clear enough to allow some light to pass through them. Silverish light beamed down, reflecting on all those individual pelts coming down, blanketing the world in a sinister glow of silver. Every single droplet carried the same macabre vibe before it hit the ground, never to be seen again. What was happening in Kuo? What could there be that even nature itself became a reflection of inner emotions? As the sun wouldn't rise for a couple of hours, there was no question about whoever inner thoughts that were reflected was still asleep. Of all the streets in town, there was one in particular where the stillness of the night was especially deafening. From the outside it was calm and peaceful, though there was one house that could explain what was going on. Inside of that house, which was just as ordinary as all the others in the same street, it was ghostly silent. Though nothing meaningful could be observed or heard, life was still there. In one of the rooms, gentle breathing filled the air, embracing the covered forms of Mr. and Mrs. Hyodo, which was a peaceful reflection from the complete opposite of what was happening in the room of their son. Inside of Issei's room, there was a storm of different emotions, constantly colliding with one another before disappearing as if they've never existed at all. Like with his parents, there were 2 bodies closely attached, though for completely different reasons. As Asia had forgotten to close the window last night, it was significantly colder in his room, which the visible puffs of their breaths that mixed above their faces before disappearing into nothingness showed. For one was calmly drifting in a peaceful slumber, a small smile on her rosy cheeks whilst latched on the closest heat source, gripping it tighter for good measure when a cold shudder ran through her body. Her small but soft legs wrapped around one of the heat source's longer one. Even for those with the darkest of hearts, it was obvious how much the girl loved the person she was holding on to, as the small smile on her face indicated. Non-surprisingly dreaming of happy moments with her heat source. However, her heat source was a completely different story. Issei was drenched in sweat, unable to turn or wake up. One moment he would breathe as if he tasted oxygen for the first time in his life, and the second as if he had an abundance of it and stopped breathing altogether. Something was plaguing his mind before relaxing in the soft body next to him. He was the perfect embodiment of what was happening outside. Under his skin, in his blood veins, hormones were fueling his mind and dreams, taking his thoughts somewhere he didn't expect them to go. I will never try to find out what would happen if I cheat, were Issei's last inner mumbles, shivering what would happen with Grayfia. In the underworld, Seraph's bed. If you move, Issei-chan, I'll freeze you to the bed. Seraph giggled in her bed, holding her pillow tightly. However, in her dream she handled Issei like a large teddy bear. Not like he minded. Opening parenthesis ... Not like any of the readers would mind either. Ever since asking Sona for help, Issei has been using the 2 weeks she's asked for him to behave to the fullest. Besides keeping up with his academic tasks, he hasn't neglected his duties for Rias either. The first half of the week there was still some tension between the two, which was quickly cast aside when Asia showed her teary face in the clubroom. Issei kept improving himself as he asked for help from the other members of the peerage. After the first week, Akeno could no longer help Issei with his magic as it increased too slowly, much to their disappointment as they both came to enjoy the time spent together, even though Akeno sent him suggestive glances with the occasional sad glance, much to Issei's confusion. The hole Akeno left behind in his training schedule was soon filled in by Kaneko. The Neko show was a much stricter trainer than Akeno, and much more expensive. After training she would drag Issei to the confectionery store, being paid in her favorite candy. But it was well worth it. Issei's control and strength increased drastically overnight and improved his relationship with Kaneko altogether. Much to the amusement of the orc when they found Kaneko eating in Issei's lap, purring loudly when he rubbed her head. Issei was certain the slap mark he received when laughing about it was still visible. Not much has changed between Issei and Kiba. They still tried to jog 3 times per week before school and lately they were certain someone was following them. The only lead they had was the few strings of blue hair they saw peeking behind a wall before disappearing. And finally, after the 2 weeks, Diedrich gave Issei a passing grade for the fire he created in his heart. Fire that wouldn't do under for any other dragon. Everything was going well for Issei so far. He was ready for the next step, becoming a middle-class devil. With the exception of the occasional sound of chalk on a board, there was little to no noise in the classroom as everyone was focusing and preparing for the coming exams. Now when we use X at this side, and Y at the other. We are able to, the teacher explained before being interrupted by the school bell. Ding dang dong. Some happy sighs were released by some of the students when they heard the bell and stretched themselves. Alright class, we stop here for today. I advise everyone to read chapter 4 and prepare assignment B for the next lesson. A unanimous shout of HAAI answered the teacher before he left the classroom. As quickly as he left, there were some already following him in his slipstream. Several of the girls got together in groups whilst others preferred to be alone for a few minutes before leaving. One of those was Issei until he noticed 2 girls making their way towards him. Asia and Xenovia. One a devil, the other a devout follower of the church with a severe dislike of devils, though they hit it off almost instantly after Xenovia apologized to Asia. Not much had changed between himself and her, still receiving odd looks from her and would wordlessly follow him around school. Issei-san, Asia brightly said with a small blush. She didn't know why herself but since this morning, the blush Issei displayed when talking to her got contagious. From Xenovia he received a small nod. Asia, Issei replied, trying to keep a straight face. Xenovia-san, how has school been for you, Xenovia-san? Issei asked curiously. Are you enjoying living in Japan? Learning kanji has been a pain, but it's going fruitful so far. Xenovia replied monotonously. I am adapting to my situation in living in this Far East country. The mission I've set myself up with is going as expected for now. A mission? Asia asked with curiosity shining in her eyes. Though Xenovia showed an emotionless face, behind her eyes the facade she set herself up with was breaking under Asia's sheer innocence. I can't tell you, Xenovia exclaimed softly. Ah, Asia, Issei said as he wrapped one of his arms around her. I'm having an appointment with a new client tonight. How about having dinner with Xenovia tonight? Xenovia's eyes widened and tried to come up with a refusal as her mission wasn't over for today. Ah, Asia happily replied. Bushu-san invited me for dinner. Do you want to join us? She hesitantly asked. I definitely won't. Even the suggestion itself would be enough to be cast into hell. Were Xenovia's inner thoughts speaking? I can't. Xenovia replied under heavy pressure from those innocent eyes. I have to jog. Ooh, Asia answered downtrodden. Enough exercise is important too. Her hesitant smile was Xenovia's reason to keep quiet for now. Issei's inner pervert was trying to act up again as he looked at Asia's innocent smile and quickly shook his head twice before addressing Xenovia. Kiba and I jog a couple of times per week. Do you want to join us? He asked. No, thank you. Issei expected sounded an awful lot like, I already am. What was that? Issei replied, but before Xenovia could come up with an escape, there was already one for her. BZZZZ. The school's intercom buzzed and addressed the students. Class 2B, Hyodo Issei. Report to the student council. After the message, some of the remaining classmates gave Issei weird looks. Issei-san, did you do something? Asia wondered out loud. Xenovia was also very interested in his answer. Maybe, maybe not. Issei cryptically answered with a small smile before heading off with one last wave to the girls. Issei walked calmly through the empty hallways. The last time he made the mistake of running Sona made sure he received a punishment he'd never forget. Spotting the familiar gilded door of the student council room, he prepared himself for a possibly negative reply from Sona. Knocking twice before hearing a calm voice allowing him to enter, he opened the door to something he definitely did not expect. When Issei stepped inside, he nearly lost himself over the 2 young women that were waiting for him. Instead of seeing a serious Tsubaki and Sona in their school uniforms, he found the 2 wearing something fitting for a teacher. Both wore a small blush, one for walking around a student like this whilst the other had a more playful look in her eyes. The playful one, Tsubaki, walked up to Issei and guided him to a chair in front of the desk. Sona, who was still blushing and still couldn't believe how her queen convinced her to wear these clothes, coughed calmly. Trying to regain her usual demure. Hyodo-kun, she snapped a little stronger than usual. You've met the conditions of our agreement. As such, Tsubaki and I will tutor you for the coming days until the exams. The smile Issei gave her was almost enough to not feel shame for wearing these clothes. Now Issei-kun, I've already informed Rias that you will be with us after class for the foreseeable future and that your duties towards her household will be later in the day. Sona continued her explanation. Issei-kun, Issei asked with a small frown, causing Sona's eyes to widen. Indeed Issei-kun, you're our young protege now. Tsubaki whispered as she grabbed his shoulder from behind him, teasing his ear. She walked towards the desk and sat on it, giving Issei a good view of her long legs. Don't worry Issei-kun, Tsubaki-sensei allows you to observe her as much as you want. Tsubaki continued. Even Sona was looking forward to finally wear these clothes. Not again, Sona thought as she remembered seeing this side of her before. First question. Tsubaki smiled sweetly, do you like our clothes? Issei sat in his chair with his mouth right open. What is going on today? He thought before dropping his head in his hands. Instead of answering Tsubaki's question, he asked one of his own. Do you want to be a teacher, Tsubaki Fukakaicho and Sona Kaichu? Sigh, Sona whispered and walked up from behind her desk. Quite so, Issei-kun. That is my dream, but for now we will start our first lesson. Slowly moving his head upwards at the sound of her voice, before finally focusing on her angered face. Internally he hissed at her look. Seraphal had a similar look before she not so gently bit him in his dream. Strike 1. Kaichu's body looks quite nice, don't you think? Tsubaki asked, receiving a nod faster than Issei was able to stop it, causing Sona's eyes to narrow even more. Strike 2. Our young student's debaucherous thoughts are still there. Tsubaki voiced calmly. A young man's lecherous eyes roaming all over me. That was strike 3 for Issei as he finally spoke up to his teachers. There's only one person I'd perv on and it's neither of you. He bluntly exclaimed. The words hadn't left his lips or Tsubaki was already giggling madly, not much later followed by the small laughs leaking from Sona's lips, who had the decency to look away from him. Not much later their laughs subsided and Sona ended the conversation. Very well, Issei-kun. I'll forget your eyes were roaming all over me, little pervert. Fufu. Behaving as she usually does, she grabbed a few books from her desk drawer and said, I hope our guidance brings any significance to your results. We expect you to persevere and give your best efforts. Having received his first instructions from Sona, before she herself had to begin her own tasks. A king never stops working, as she said. Her tutoring was taken over by Tsubaki, who was still in her playful mood. Looking at Issei, she suggestively tried to get his attention. Young men that get me to act seriously are the best. Tsubaki sultry whispered when she bent over him, deeply immersed in reading his book. Tsubaki went rigid when she heard her king's familiar tone. We are here to help Issei-san with his examinations. Not to teach him your preferences. In men, high. With these answers you would receive a passing grade. Tsubaki said with an odd voice. I have never known that you were a decent student. Despite his overactive mind concerning women, Issei-kun has always been a diligent student. Sona said as she had finished her own duties. The life of a high-class devil wasn't always easy. Leaving her seat, she walked into one of her private rooms, grabbing a few items out before returning to her queen and student. In front of Issei, she placed 2 items of importance. A large leather book with a large C-tree seal, and a neat stack of handwritten notes. Handling faster than his thoughts, Issei's eyes looked over the notes and saw several theses about the existence and origin of devils. However, the book was what really caught his attention. Seeing the unbridled curiosity in his eyes, Sona smirked internally as she grabbed the book. This book is very special to me and my family. She began softly. It has been passed from heir to heir since my first ancestor. One day I will give it to my first child, but for now I will allow you to use it. Sona continued before gently handing it over to Issei. There are only 75 copies ever made. One for the pillar families, one for the Mao, and one for the 2 libraries. Then this book is. Issei whispered as his fingers ran over the letters. Ars Goetia. That is the case. The Ars Goetia bestowed upon the C-tree dynasty by the original Mao Lucifer, Sona recited from memory. Now these notes. Sona said and directed her attention away from the book. The exam you are about to do will no doubt have questions that Rias and myself had to answer in middle school. As such I will give you my own insights of the time I had similar exams. Thank you very much, Sona-sensei. Issei replied softly. I really am. I am pleased to hear that. Even a young man with dubious thoughts can be thankful. She smiled, again stabbing him in his past behavior. Grumbling under his breath, Issei slowly opened the age-old book Sona entrusted him with. Thanks to being a devil he is able to read the demonic language that held the information about the pillar families. Is Lucifuge a pillar family? Issei thought as he began his search. Marquis Laraje, President Malthus, he read. I guess they aren't a pillar family. Why don't you read Rias family for us? Sona suggested calmly, sipping on the tea Tsubaki made for her. Let's see. Ah, here it is. Issei conveyed. Grumori is a strong duke of hell that governs 26 legions of demons. He tells all things past, present and future, about hidden treasures, and procures the love of women, young and old, but especially maidens. He is depicted as appearing in the form of a beautiful woman with the crown of a duchess tied around her waist, and riding a camel. So the Grumori ancestor is a woman. Issei wondered openly, causing Tsubaki to smile broadly as she knew the answer. Sorry, Rias, Sona thought as she said to her friend's pawn that Ichi was not. For a short moment the room was quieted by the awkward silence before Issei mumbled something unheard under his breath and said, I'll check the C-tree as well, causing Tsubaki's grin to widen even more and Sona's eyes to take a fearful look. That won't be necessary. Sona voiced calmly, though Tsubaki saw how shaken she was. It is no problem, I'm already there. Issei retorted and began reading. C-tree is a great prince of hell, and reigns over 60 legions of demons. He causes men to love women and vice versa, and Issei looked at Sona and smiled like a serpent having caught his prey. A full-blown blush now spreading on her cheeks. God can make people bare themselves naked if desired. Sona could almost see a long serpentine tongue laughing at her, mocking her if he'd say the one word she always used for him. Don't you say it, Hyodo. She yelled completely out of character. His eyes kept mocking her trembling form as he for once could say what he was always called. And in a sugar-sweet tone he stated, Pervert, she's pretty feisty, partner. D-Drake roared with a chuckle as he observed Issei, now sporting a large black eye as he was listening to Tsubaki. Next to her, Sona was still expressing her displeasement in a glare she was sending his way, only to be accentuated by the small red tinge on her face. Now, Issei-kun, Tsubaki began. The middle-class devil exams have questions regarding 3 different subjects. A written report that addresses the theme of aim and greed. A written test about the history and the government of the underworld. A practical one-on-one fight with another participant. In your cases you are the current Red Dragon Emperor and able to use Balance Breaker, you will presumably have to fight one of the proctors. I think I get it now. Issei replied with a curt bow. But I have one more question. Yes, where can I find the pure blood devils that don't belong to a pillar family? Issei asked. For example, I can't find Grayfia, Mal Lucifer's queen anywhere. Sona, can you? Tsubaki started as her king took over. Grayfia Lucifuge would be one of the so-called extra devil families. In the past they swore allegiance to the original Satan family. Much like the Satan family, we Cetri have vassal families as well. She explained clearly, but her circumstances are different from virtually all other extras. Sighing softly as she sat back in her chair, lifting her glasses to clean them out of habit. Basically Issei-kun, an extra family stays with the family they made a blood oath with. When a member of the extras turn their back on their masters, they are excommunicated from their family. However, as Grayfia is the last known member of the Lucifuge line, she can't excommunicate herself. She is stuck serving under a false name. There are many extras that resent her over this little-known fact. Damn, Issei exclaimed after Sona finished. That's a lot to take in. It is, Sona whispered under her breath. Having followed a lot of it. Issei-kun, we will see you tomorrow evening again. Good night. Concerns regarding legitimacy in ruling former Mao territories are still being fought out in the backrooms of the. Sona lectured but soon stopped when she saw Issei dozing in his seat. She couldn't really fault him as it was already late at night and he'd been spending a good amount of time taking notes. It was the final day of their training. As for tomorrow, 2 other individuals will take over for her and Tsubaki. Breathing deeply to herself as it was a long day for her as well, Sona closed her ruler and softly shook Issei awake. Sarah, he softly mumbled, causing Sona to pay attention to his every word. Shaking him with some more voice and saw him opening his eyes. Did I fall asleep? Issei groaned as he stretched himself. Yes, but for now something else. I heard you calling out Sarah in your sleep. Are you referring to my sister? Sona asked with barely restrained curiosity. Since birth her parents were very tight-lipped about her estranged older sister. Issei talked very vocally about Seraphal, meeting her and getting to know her. But for his own safety he forgot to tell her about Seraphal's sleepover and their confrontation with the former exorcists. Sona was surprised. Her student talked about her elder sister, the complete opposite of how her parents did. She felt her heart throb painfully as she remembered not spending any time with her and basically treat her like the annoyance her parents said she was. I see. Sona replied, unsure of herself in a long time. Please take care of her. Of course, she's become precious to me and my parents in a short amount of time. Issei stated as a fact. Relief and gratitude shone from her own magenta-colored eyes as she thanked Issei. Now, Rias and Akeno have asked me to let them teach you our alphabet, and I've agreed to it. Sona said as if she didn't just drop a bombshell. However, I still expect you to make good on your promise the coming week. Okay Sona Kaichu, thank you very much for everything. I promise that I will never forget what you've done for me. Issei said before he stood up and embraced his former teacher for a few moments and left, leaving a flustered Sona in his wake. Era UFUFU. Our naughty student has arrived, were the first words that assaulted Issei as he stepped inside the clubroom before he almost turned around from the sheer sensuality from Akeno's expression on her face. Walking up to her favorite pawn, Akeno guided him by hand to one of the couches where Rias was already seated, and even when he sat Akeno didn't release his hands from her soft and slender finger, suggestively drawing circles on the palm of his hand. Akeno, we need to teach our adorable Kohai. Rias huffed, causing. Why? I can already read all languages. Issei asked. Fufufu. Akeno giggled as she blew hotly in his ear shell. Let your Onisama explain. Issei-kun, everything you read is immediately translated into Japanese. So you never even notice the runes you need to be able to write. Akeno said in her Onisama voice. Lightning sparked around her fingers as she licked them. I'm a very strict teacher. We can't fail our king. Issei's skin got paler when the intensity of the lightning increased, as did her giggles. Here is the book you need to learn, but we also have an even better incentive for you to do well, Rias said as she and her queen stood up. Issei's mouth fell open from astonishment when the. Again, we know you have eyes for Grayfia, but we aren't unattractive. Rias stated as a matter of fact. And boys love women's skin. To put weight behind her words, Akeno and Rias. If you do well, you might see more than you'd expect. For the rest of the night Issei kept studying, getting hit by numerous bolts of lightning and seeing more of the girls than he bargained for. How much though, is something he will take to the grave. Come in, Sona said as she and her peerage were working in the council room. There were only morning classes so her peerage had a lot of time for their duties. Ah Issei-kun, you're here. She voiced as she saw her student enter. Much to the surprise of her peerage and jealousy of her male pawn. Hello Sona Kaichu, Issei replied before a frown marred his sensei's face. Really? He dejectedly asked, and received a nod. Sigh, hello Sona sensei, Tsubaki sensei. He muttered embarrassedly. Saji, who till now had remained silent, went red in the face when he noticed his rival's red face when referring to his king as sensei. Hyodo. He angrily roared. What kind of blackmail are you having on my king? I won't allow it if I can't participate. Within a second, several things happened. Tsubaki dropped her tea, Sona was suffocating her perverted pawn with a sea dragon made of water, and Issei was laughing so much that it hurt. Bishop from d4, where am I going to place you? Issei calmly said. Sona's sole request last week that he would play a game of chess with her. So there's no explicit game you've taught him. Saji mumbled. However, to those closely listening it almost sounded sad. Saji. Sona's rook, Tsubasa said. If she'd have a game like that she would have included me in training Hyodo-san. Issei tried to conceal a small grin when he spotted several bulging veins on her forehead but quickly diffused the situation. What you guys probably don't know is that I will have my middle-class devil exam soon, and I have received a lot of help from Sona-sensei and Tsubaki-sensei. That's really soon though, Saji surprisingly said. Most lower-class devils don't receive an invitation their first year. Is that so? Issei awkwardly chuckled as he moved his bishop randomly. Why are you rising up in the ranks already? Saji asked curiously, even Sona didn't yet know why. I am also quite curious. Sona added calmly. Just because. Issei mumbled under his breath. Such a sudden change doesn't come without reason, Issei-kun. Sona replied, and with a final stern look at him, he cracked. Issei explained everything up till now. Meeting Grayfia, falling for her and deciding to pursue her. That's why I want to work my way up. To prove myself to her. Issei said with a blush. In my head it sounds so much better than saying it. Wa Hyodo. You're a good guy after all. Saji cried as he hugged his self-proclaimed rival. Sona shook her head twice with a small smile, thinking how the eternal pervert would choose one girl over a harem. Having won her game against Issei and sending him off, Sona cleared the chessboard when her queen took Issei's place. Wordlessly they began their game at a much higher level. Even human grandmasters would be hard-pressed against either of them. Why were you playing chess with our student, Sona? Tsubaki voiced. Are you trying to make him your fiancé? Claiming one of her queen's pieces she answered, nonsense. Helping a kohai with his exams is nothing short of a high-class devil's obligation. The game of chess was a mere repayment from Issei, which allowed me to observe his growth. So what if he wins? He won't, but if he hypothetically does. Having dreaded to go this far in answering her queen, Sona replied truthfully. Even though his perverseness has declined, he already has heart for another woman. Taking that would make me a true devil. Though I can't say that a man like that wouldn't be attractive. Era, what is this? Has our student even the eyes of his sensei on him? Tsubaki giggled freely. Sona's voice reached her queen. Ice cold. Tsubaki. At the same time, walking just out of the main gate, Issei had every intention of spending his day at home, taking the time to relax. However, someone was waiting for him. Issei-kun. Waiting next to the gate was no other than Akeno. Akeno-san. Issei hesitantly asked as he saw the downtrodden look on her face. Slowly reaching out, she grabbed one of his hands between her own and asked. Issei, do you have any plans for today? Nothing serious for now, he answered. Is something wrong? Can you come with me please? Akeno asked softly. Issei breathed and gave her a nod, allowing himself to be led by his older sister figure. Unknowingly they were being followed by two figures. Walking up the last pair of stairs, Issei and Akeno arrived at her home, the village's shrine. This is where I live, Akeno said with a sense of pride, though there was some sadness in her tone. It's pretty large, do you live here alone? He asked curiously. Akeno nodded and added that Ria stayed over pretty often. As Issei was appreciating some of the artworks inside of the shrine, Akeno returned with some tea. Thank you for the tea, Issei said as he took a small sip, enjoying her tea as it was tasty as usual. Looking at his host, he saw her eyes filled with unshed tears. Not waiting for Akeno to start talking, he set his cup to the side and pulled her into him. What happened, Akeno? Issei asked gently, holding her close to him. No more was needed for her to lose a quiet wail of sadness. It was the first time she cried like this since telling Issei of her fallen angel past. It's Rias, she cried as she heaved. She's becoming more and more like her brother. Before Issei could ask what she meant, Akeno continued. In the past she would do anything to help us. Now she's comparing her behavior with other high-class devils. If it's something they would do as well. She kept holding on to him, grabbing two fistfuls of his shirt. I don't want to lose Rias. She's the only family I have. Akeno whimpered. What about me, am I not your little brother? Issei bemusedly asked. She unsurely replied. No other than Rias had ever used the words, family, on her like that. You are my family, he said again. So are the others too, you know. More tears were shed, not only in sadness but also in happiness of knowing there were others that loved her as well. Yes, you're my sweet, little brother. Akeno murmured in his chest. Don't worry about me, Akeno-san. Even with Mal Lucifer against me I won't give up. Okay, Issei, I believe in you. Seer's ex Lucifer is becoming a real pain. Issei complained to Didraig as he walked down the shrine stairs. After having helped Akeno overcome her fears and emotional break, he carried the exhausted girl to her bed where she quickly fell asleep. As he walked down with the sun burning on his back, causing a very long shadow to follow him, the two that were tailing him left their position with their own thoughts. I guess I was wrong about you. Even a devil can help others. Xenovia thought as she watched the intriguing young man leave. At the same time, someone far above the clouds, floating on fluorescent blue wings. Pitiful, he sneered to his counterpart. The malevolent thoughts that were ingrained since birth were legendary. You hold the power to make any of those weaklings do what you desire. Just as him he was a half-human, half-devil, only he had the blood of the legendary Morningstar flowing through his veins. He was trained by his father and grandfather to enslave those who were less than him. When they found out that one of their blood had a legendary sacred gear in his possession, only strengthened the thought of their God-given right to enslave the weak. Fool, he thought as he flew away. Within 10 minutes of leaving Akeno's shrine, Issei arrived home, fully expecting to find an empty home. But when he unlocked the door, he found the girl that had occupied Issei's mind ever so often since that night. Sitting calmly on the couch was Seraphal Leviathan, wearing her magic girl outfit, visibly brightening up when her eyes locked with his. Issei-chan, she happily yelled before closing their distance with a single leap. If he was a lesser man, he would be blushing up a storm by the way she had pressed herself into him. However, happiness was more important than. I missed you, Seraphal whispered in her natural tone. I've been so busy at work, and I'm not even done yet. Not that I'm not glad to see you, but why are you here if you're not done yet? Issei asked as he released their embrace. You see, Seraphal began, uncertain. This time your client is a Mao. In an unknown location, where only the lights of bright holographic screens shone, was illuminated by a light blue flash as Seraphal and Issei appeared. Ijuka-chan, we're here. She excitedly yelled before another presence appeared. No need for yelling, Seraphal. I'm right here, a voice said from behind them. Ah, it's you, Issei said as he remembered the man from before. Yes, it's nice to meet you again. The green-haired man replied with a smile. I'm Ijuka Beelzebub. Now last time we've met, Sears promised me that I could expertly look after your health, but that did not happen. Ijuka said with a frown. Still, I'd like to know what happened to you. Walking through the impromptu laboratory, Ijuka motioned Issei to follow him in a room with a simple bed and a large computer. Please lie down on the bed, he continued as he grabbed a small device to sample liquids. Now for the reason you are here. I'm assuming you are aware of a certain new power you've been able to use. Ijuka asked calmly but with a knowing smile. Something I've never thought possible through the use of my invention. Remembering what the man was talking about, Issei released a sudden sigh, unfortunately. I would imagine many people being happy with what you've received. The green-haired Mao answered. It's something between me and the Grimoire siblings, though more the older than the younger one. He said irritatedly. I understand. Still, your use so far has been commendable. Ijuka mentioned as he made preparations. Ijuka knew something was up with Sears. Devils can't naturally be as kind as he portrayed himself to be. A certain dragon was indebted to him because of Sears after all. What I want for now is a little of your blood. I want to see whether something in your DNA has changed, maybe a mutation of your genomes. Ijuka began, but slowly began to mumble out loud. Having extracted some of the red liquid, he ran his formulas over the blood. I'm going to start my research, so for now I have nothing else for you to do. When I have the results I'll let Seraphal know. The excited man said as he sent the young man away. Sensing the disappearance of the two signatures, Ijuka already finished his research and read the results from his screen. How interesting. I would never have imagined these anomalies, but then again I'm almost certain it will never happen again. I have to say it went much faster than I thought. Issei voiced when they returned home, before gaining a tick mark when he saw that it was already late at night. Sorry, Issei-chan, our day-night cycle isn't comparable to the human world. Seraphal answered as she stepped inside after him. They entered the kitchen to see two covered plates with food waiting for them. Next time let me know you're late, XXX mom. Warming their dinner in the microwave, Issei and Seraphal amiably talk about what the other party missed after 2 weeks of not seeing each other. How is training going? Is Sona teaching you everything? Seraphal asked curiously. Sona-sensei has helped me a lot. Issei smiled, but there were some subjects she had little to no information of. Like what? Maybe I can help. Seraphal replied, happy her sister was doing well. There's not a lot I can find about the history of the Civil War and something about true forms. Issei said and was alarmed when Seraphal dropped her utensils from her hands. Is something wrong? Do you need some water? Issei continued as she still didn't move. No, I'm okay, just a little surprised you had heard of true forms. Seraphal earnestly said, I can help you with the history part tomorrow as it takes a lot of time, but I can tell you a little about true forms. Moving from the kitchen to the living room, Seraphal made Issei promise not to reveal what she was about to say. Let me tell you about true forms. True power is sometimes named accomplished. It is the embodiment of our power. To truly master it you have to suffer first. Seraphal cryptically explained. I don't really get it. Issei replied. To become truly powerful you have to suffer. I understand that training will make someone strong, but how is that suffering? Now, Issei. Seraphal began seriously. I will tell you part of the way to true power. First, you need to reach Mao class. She said and suddenly released her wings. Seraphal wasn't doing anything but Issei could feel her sheer presence and indomitable will. Second, you need to have more magic power than your wings can expel. She continued as she retracted her wings into her back, and then you will reach your barrier. So who has a true form? Issei asked, but received a small glare from the kind girl, much to his confusion. Sorry, Seraphal said, I didn't mean to glare at you. It's a taboo to ask who has become accomplished. I guess I can tell you a little about Sears. She talked on. His true form allows his body to become a controllable cloud of his power of destruction. That sounds dangerous, Issei swore, especially when I want to fight him one day. So what is the true form good for? He hesitantly continued and saw a dangerous smile on Leviathan's face. True form allows us to resist light from the highest of angels during battle. The next evening, after spending the night digesting the information about true forms, Issei was face to face with another girl trying the teacher's approach. Then again, he knew Seraphal liked to cosplay. What does a Mao control, is a question we ask ourselves often as well. The new teacher said, in the past, it was simpler. The 9 kings controlled the 9 rings of hell. After a small conflict, the 7 princes took over, but they were all killed during the last war, resulting into 4 titles. So now the 4 Mao control the rings. Issei voiced, before being interrupted. Yes, but in name only. Of those 9 circles, only 3 are truly under our control. 4 circles have been completely overrun by lower-class demons and devils, which would result in a new war if challenges in the other 2 circles were simply speaking wiped out during the war. After a few more questions about the former Maos and hierarchical structure, Serafal gave Issei a few-minute break. What else can you tell me about Sona-chan? Serafal asked with barely restrained glee after hearing her friend so positive about her sister. She teaches me how to play chess. Issei said. Choke. Chess. She asked to be certain, receiving a nod from Issei. Serafal looked down a little as she knew of Citri protocol in marriage. But I don't think I'll ever be able to win. He grinned. She's really good and I felt like she wasn't even taking me seriously. Though her mood was lifted, she still looked a little down. Let's have dinner, Sarah. During dinner, Issei kept noticing how Serafal was a lot less excited than she usually was. Sarah, Issei called out after dinner when she prepared to leave again for some late-night work. Where are you going? He continued. This is your home. It's okay with my parents. Like Asia, they hope you become their daughter one day. Issei embarrassedly said. Serafal, you are staying here from now on. He didn't expect much of a reaction at first, but something felt wrong when she gave him an empty smile. Alright, that's enough, come with me. What's going on? Issei asked as he held Serafal. Instead of a normal reply, she whispered very softly in his shoulder. Citri clan ceremony. And what does that mean? He asked. Almost fearfully. If you win from Sona in chess, she will marry you. Serafal muttered. As hard as he tried, a small blush appeared on his cheeks, before slapping himself for good measure. Wouldn't you like to be family? Issei asked softly as he held her. We wouldn't. I'm no longer a Citri. Serafal exclaimed, opening a very painful wound. When I left for the branch family, I was excommunicated from the clan. I love my little sister and I wish her all the best. She continued on, but whatever else she said was murmured in his chest. She can't have you. With the final tears that came from opening her deep wounds, she was making no attempts of releasing Issei from her grip. Issei allowed Serafal to have her moment until the door suddenly opened and Asia entered. Issei-san, Asia-tan, Kya, Serafal-sama, Livia-tan, what's going on, girls? Issei asked as Asia and Serafal were tightly wrapped around his sides. Surprising, it was Asia who attacked first when she wrapped her legs around his. It didn't take long for Serafal to respond as she pulled his head in her chest. After some more pulling from the left to the right, they stopped and took a shoulder each. However, right now Serafal had the upper hand as Issei was watching her closely and tried to do something she'd accidentally had seen on TV. Single quote. Good night, you two, he said and closed his eyes tiredly. The rain was loudly pelting on the windows, with the occasional lightning flash in the distance, waking Issei up with a small tremble. He tried to look at the clock but found himself embraced by Serafal's arms and both girls hadn't moved an inch from their spots, so it mustn't have been a long time since closing his eyes. Though he didn't know it, Serafal was awake as well, having felt his body twitch and his breathing hitch. She was surprised and was certain she was flaming red when she felt him rub his nose in her neck and could smell her hair. Not much later she felt his fingers dance over her ribs, her shoulders, and finally her spine. Resting where she broke her back all those years ago when she released her wings at a much too early age. She felt him whispering something as his hot breath reached her neck, so she stretched her ears to her limit. I want to know more about you. Before he made himself comfortable in her again, only this time he held her tightly as well, and only a moment later she heard his breathing evening out. For now she would simply enjoy being near him, and when she knows more about her own emotions, she will tell him everything. Christmas omake, Santa's thoughtful gifts. This omake will be in O form. The sun had set on this very cold, but very special day. It was Christmas, the time to celebrate together with friends, family, and for some by themselves. Christmas is a day for everyone. It had been a busy day for Issei as he, under the cover of night, walked home wearing his extra thick winter coat, gloves, and a furry hat. Winters in Kuo can be unexpectedly mean, so his mother made sure he wore warm clothes. He was much warmer than a polar bear was in the sun. Issei walked alone through empty streets, which were now all dark and only the sterile yet lifeless lights of the stores illuminated his path. But when he finally reached his own neighborhood, everything changed. The light, the warmth that came from the houses in the street now filled Issei's eyes with happiness. He has been waiting for this moment all day, just like the past year and the year before that. Spending the day with the Orc Club whilst it was snowing outside, and even though they asked him to spend a little more time with them, he had to leave even though Issei had a great time. For an Asian country, Japan had embraced Christmas like many others of the Western world, and as Issei stopped in front of the former house of his friend Irina, he noticed the family now living there were happily opening presents. Of all the homes in the street, only the one where he lived was dark, and that surprised him. With the warm glow of the other homes following his shadow to the door, the small crunch of snow under his boots and the small snowflakes that began falling from the sky, Issei opened the door and entered his home. Almost just as cold as the outside. Whilst removing his coat, Issei turns the central heating on and the lights. His parents weren't home as they had taken a short vacation to an onsen town nearby. As he blew some hot air in his cupped hands, he walked to the kitchen where he found a small letter. Issei expected it to be a small apology from Serafal as she was supposed to be home. Quickly he skimmed the message. Dear Issei-chan, this Leviathan had a good idea and made an exciting tour for you to enjoy. Follow the letters that I give you, and because I want to see you soon, this is your first letter. Why? Why? Issei thought as he reread the letter. Well, I've got nothing to do. Let's see what she has done. In his bedroom he found the letter A, in the room of his parents he found an I, when he reached the basement he found the G, and when he opened Asia's room he spotted another A on her bed. Yaga. Issei wondered as he read through the letters. As it made no sense to him, he tried to look outside as well. He didn't want to walk through the cold, but as he noticed another letter on the balcony of the laundry room, he quickly jumped outside and back with the letter R now firmly in his hands. Having visited every room in the house, he returned to the living room to find a new envelope on the kitchen table. Together with a small note, he finds another letter. Congratulations with finding every single letter in the house. All you need to do now is combine the letters in a single word and your gift will present itself. The note explained. Yaigar, Issei said and picked up the final letter, the letter F. Sitting down on the floor, he spread out all the different letters in several sequences until he finally noticed Grayfia. When the letters were spelled and he called out her name, something unexpected happened. The name began to shine and a poof was heard. A puff of smoke filled Issei's field of view, and there she was. From her feet up, Issei recognized all her features. Her maid uniform to all the way up to her serene but surprised silver eyes staring at his seated form. Gee, Grayfia, Issei mumbled in surprise. How'd you suddenly get here? Grayfia, who was a little disoriented, was still a little taken aback. Having been forcefully summoned from her work, though not entirely unhappy as she saw her favorite person. Issei-san, she voiced with a small amount of happiness lacing her voice. Were you the one that summoned Grayfia? A female voice abruptly yelled from upstairs, followed by some stamping on the floor. Come over here. Even though she was interrupted, Grayfia didn't move from the kitchen until she was ushered by Issei, telling her it was most likely Serafal that summoned her. Not strange, as Issei and Grayfia both agreed that he didn't have the means to summon her. With Grayfia leaving the room, her feet near silently clicking on the ground, moving over the stairs, Issei was once again alone. Letting himself fall down on the couch, he turned on his side and watched the snowflakes fall. With the occasional sounds coming from upstairs, preventing him from closing his eyes, Issei picked up a small sound coming from the front door. As he didn't have anything else to do, Issei checked out the sounds. Opening the door, he nearly stumbled on the cold tiles as he saw a perfect square box neatly wrapped up in red. Picking the box up, he saw no name or message. But as he looked around the street hoping for a familiar face, Issei noticed it was just as empty as when he walked home. Scratching the back of his head, Issei brought the gift inside, never hearing the sounds of jingles in the distance. But when he returned to the living room, his breath was swept away. There he found the two women that meant the world to him. Serafal, not wearing her usual magic girl outfit, was now dressed in a form-fitting red dress. Nothing strange about that with Christmas. However, she also wore a white apron accompanied by a small blush. Twintails, red dress, apron. Issei suddenly had a nosebleed for all the wrong reasons, so he quickly looked at his other guest and the nosebleed soon intensified. Grayfia was also wearing a red dress, snugly fitting in all the right place, accentuating her beauty for Issei. But what surprised him the most was the fact that she too had a small blush on her pale cheeks. The two women, now having noticed Issei, also spotted the wrapped up box in his hands. Issei-chan, what do you have there with you? Serafal cutely asked as she tapped on the box. Grayfia, though saying nothing, also had her silver eyes on the box. Deciding to simply open it, Issei walked to the kitchen, where an entire dinner was prepared, and opened the box with Serafal and Grayfia sliding next to him. Carefully he opened the package to find a closed second box inside with a small written text on top of it. Don't open until midnight. I guess we'll fight, Issei said as he looked at the two, before focusing on the dinner. Did you make dinner for us, Serafal? Proudly, she stuck her chest out, causing her to shake, and explained that she's been slaving the day away back in the underworld preparing the food and summoning Grayfia. And now we're here. Serafal finished. Issei could only smile at her for being this thoughtful. Even if it was her first Christmas spending with others, it was kind of her. He decided to thank her with a big hug. Grayfia was also thankful to Serafal but thanked her slightly more restrained with a firm bow. For her it was also a first to celebrate Christmas. After releasing Serafal, who was positively mortified by his sudden embrace, Issei also held Grayfia close to him and thanking her and her being in his home just the same. Their body contact was not unwelcome as Grayfia made no attempts to stop him and silently endured his warmth. Soon the three sat at the kitchen table and enjoyed Serafal's cooking. As time moved on and everyone enjoyed themselves, they ate their fill. Surprisingly, even Grayfia was very talkative in a private setting, which caused Serafal to calm down a little. The trio continued their conversation in the living room where they relaxed on the couch. Issei left them alone for a moment to prepare some hot chocolate and take the box as it was almost midnight. Issei-chan, open up, Serafal said brightly. Seeing no harm in opening it, Issei opened the box and another poof sounded in the room. The girls are your dream gift. But ask yourself and them this, who do you love the most? And with that the box disappeared. Are you girls ALR? Issei began but stopped as his mouth fell open from surprise. Instead of wearing their dresses, the two now embarrassed girls were wearing too. Serafal looked like she was enjoying what happened, no surprise there as she loves cosplay. However, what was a surprise was the fact that Grayfia didn't say anything and simply flushed whilst putting her hands on her. Assets. The bikini barely covered anything on this cold night. Large portions of their bodies were visible to Issei's eyes as he could watch all the way from their lower bellies till their shoulders, where only a small bikini prevented him from seeing everything. As if he did it daily, Issei wrapped his left arm around Serafal and pulled her closer, and did the same with his right arm and Grayfia. So suddenly being pulled into a heat source, their bodies finally registered what had happened and they too latched on Issei. Sarah, Grayfia, read this note, Issei said as he covered their trembling form with a convenient blanket, wrapping the three of them up. Startled by his sudden question, the girls looked at each other before they moved their heads to read the small note. You girls know I can't choose right, Issei voiced as he moved his hands from their shoulders to their cheeks. And to make sure you both know it. He kissed both girls at the same time, which they, after some confusion, returned to him just the same. What felt like an hour, the three thoroughly conveyed their feelings to each other. Feelings of love and companionship. Feelings of never having to be alone anymore. Serafal and Grayfia both warmed up tremendously from the kisses they had gotten closer and closer to the boy they loved until they were firmly pressed into him. Ah. Grayfia finally breathed out as she removed her lips from Issei's and Serafal's and returned to her relaxing position, pulling Issei's hand with her. Serafal gave one last kiss to Issei, slipping a little tongue inside of it, before she snuggled into him, tired from a hard day's work. With the three snuggled together on the couch, it didn't take long for the girls to finally fall asleep. With his two girls now calmly snoring in his chest, keeping them close and warm all the time, Issei looked outside once more to watch the last snowflakes from the night swirl down on the wind until it collided with the white blanket covering the world. He rested his eyes and calmed his breath, pulling Serafal and Grayfia just a little bit closer so they could feel his warmth all through the night. One final string of words were softly whispered in the silence of the room. Merry Christmas. There we have it again, Chapter 5. I'm finally over the hurdle that goes before the main part. Chapter 6 is the real start of the story, so watch out for the next chapter. I wrote this in 24 hours completely off my mind, so expect some heavy editing in the new year. And again, Happy Christmas and a Happy New Year. Next chapter, Chapter 6, Dragon vs the PHENEX exams. First, previous ch5 of 6 next.